Everything begins at a military camp. Inside a dark tent, lit only by a single candle, the MC patiently cleans his sword. As he polishes the blade, he reflects that this weapon is the ultimate proof of his loyalty. It represents the solemn oath he swore to Lord Atlas, making him feel as though his entire existence boils down to that single sword. Suddenly, a voice from outside the tent calls his name, interrupting his thoughts and revealing that he is named Zeno. Zeno immediately stands up and prepares to greet the person who just entered. It is Lord Atlas himself, an imposing warrior before whom the young man kneels in deep respect. The leader announces that they will advance at dawn and orders Zeno to lead the vanguard to break through the center of the enemy lines. Atlas also demands the head of the enemy general, Garzus, claiming that everything must be done for the glory of House Arclight. Upon leaving, the leader coldly commands him not to fail, leaving the young man with an intense red glow in his eyes. At that moment, Zeno remembers the cold, snowy day when he was taken in by the generous lord. He was lying powerless in the snow when help arrived, which ultimately gave him a true reason to keep living, and that gave him the strength to keep pressing forward. Zeno is absolutely certain that his life belongs entirely to the man who saved him on that difficult day. Back to reality, he feels that he owes his entire life to that man. The young man firmly replies that he will do exactly as his master commanded. Lord Atlas then leaves the tent, while Zeno remains kneeling, completely focused on his duty. Alone once more, the MC wields his sword, ready for the impending battle. On the battlefield, Zeno charges with full force and begins taking down enemy soldiers with swift, precise slashes. He delivers decisive blows that leave his opponents with zero chance to react. Even surrounded by danger, the young man maintains absolute focus on every move to carve a path through in no time. He finds himself surrounded by fallen foes, but the battle is far from over. Suddenly, Zeno hears the loud thunder of horses charging in his direction and senses new opponents approaching. He turns around and faces a massive force of enemy cavalry charging directly at him. One of the enemy riders leads the charge with a cruel, confident smirk on his face. Zeno thinks back to all the effort and heartfelt dedication he has always poured into House Arclight. Even worn out and spitting blood from the extreme exertion, he refuses to take a single step back. His unwavering loyalty acts like a razor-sharp blade, forged from the sacrifice of his very soul. He concentrates all of this spiritual strength into a single point to face the massive approaching horde. With a determined whisper, the young warrior decides to activate his special technique called Phantom Shadow. Multiple ghostly silhouettes emerge around Zeno, distorting the air and taking his opponents completely by surprise. The devastating attack cuts right through the enemy riders, taking down several of them in an instant. A few allies watching from a distance remark that such a monstrous sword style does not belong to the Arclights right after the strike. The technique exacts a heavy toll, causing Zeno to cough up a large amount of blood. As he falls to his knees exhausted, the other soldiers tell everyone not to get near that commoner trash. Zeno hears the spiteful comments from his own allies and is visibly shaken and worn out. The young man tries to catch his breath while wiping the blood from his face, feeling the crushing weight of physical exhaustion. To make matters worse, he notices a second wave of mounted enemies charging straight toward him. Zeno senses the danger and sees, atop a distant hill, the silent silhouette of Lord Atlas, quietly watching. He looks at his sword and realizes he only has enough energy to use Phantom Shadow one last time. Even exhausted, the young man looks toward his lord, hoping for some sign of support or command. However, Lord Atlas remains atop his horse high on the rocks, coldly monitoring the situation. The leader shows no intention of helping, merely staring at Zeno with a distant, relentless gaze. Sensing his lord's silence, the young man bites his lip and makes his final decision with firm resolve. He accepts his master's silent command and decides to charge into danger regardless. Zeno swears he will fight to the very end, even if it completely drains every last drop of his strength. Far from there, the imposing lord continues watching everything without uttering a single word. With a shout of determination, the young man charges headlong into the attack, remembering that he does everything for his master. Lord Atlas simply watches the young man's desperate charge, thinking that everything is unfolding exactly as he predicted. In the middle of the charge, a strange golden light begins mysteriously leaking from Zeno's body. Seeing this, Lord Atlas remarks that the time has come, for if his power increases any further, the young man will cease to be useful as a simple tool. The leader signals and coldly orders his subordinates to begin activating dark magic. In the blink of an eye, a massive blast of purple energy strikes the young man right in the heat of battle. Zeno screams in pain as he realizes he has been caught in a terrible magical trap called the Black Sealing Matrix. Bound by chains of dark energy, he cries out in desperation, unable to understand why he is being attacked. The mysterious energy continues painfully invading his body, rapidly draining his strength away. The impact of the seal makes the young man cough up even more blood, leaving him completely vulnerable on the ground. Zeno screams in intense agony as the dark magic consumes the remainder of his vital energy. Taking advantage of the warrior's weakness, an enemy soldier approaches with a massive axe in hand. The opponent calls Zeno a monster and raises the heavy weapon to deliver a final blow. Unable to defend himself, the young man is struck with extreme violence and lets out a final cry of pain. The enemy laughs cruelly and reveals he only did this at Zeno's master's request, telling him to direct his hatred toward his own leader, lying on the ground and bleeding heavily. Zeno refuses to believe that Lord Atlas could have planned something so terrible against him. With great difficulty, he opens his eyes upon hearing the heavy footsteps of approaching armor. A massive shadow looms over the weakened youth, revealing the imposing silver armor of his master. Lord Atlas stops right in front of the wounded boy and calls his name in an extremely cold tone. Zeno looks up with tears in his eyes, desperately searching for an explanation from the man he so deeply admired. Showing no mercy whatsoever, the leader states directly that the young warrior's role ends right here. With a faint voice, choking on his own blood, the young man begs to know why he is being discarded. Zeno tries to stretch out his bloody arm and whispers that he viewed him as a true father. The silver-armored warrior harshly tells the orphan not to get the wrong idea. He walks calmly and declares that he never once thought of the youth as a son at any point in his life. The painful revelation strikes the boy deeply, while his tears mix with the blood on the ground. Atlas recalls the day he found him abandoned in the snow and confesses what he truly thought upon seeing him back then. The little boy was nearly freezing to death with zero hope of survival. The Lord admits he realized instantly that the abandoned child would make the ultimate combat tool. He knew that simply giving the boy a reason to live would earn his blind, absolute loyalty. The cruel man viewed the youth merely as a convenient, disposable weapon to be used in his wars. However, the leader adds that, for a simple tool, the young man ended up growing far too strong. Since childhood, Zeno carried an extraordinarily powerful and unnatural spiritual energy within himself. Because of this, the Lord had been doing everything behind the scenes to contain the boy's hidden power. He used special potions to suppress that immense power, but the situation eventually spiraled out of control. The golden light that leaked during combat was absolute proof that the boy's energy had finally hit its ultimate limit. Atlas confesses he feared future betrayal, but Zeno desperately denies it, swearing he would never dream of betraying him. The young man shouts with all his remaining strength, swearing he would never do anything against his beloved master. His desperate plea is cut short by a violent cough, causing even more blood to trickle down his body. The soldier mocks the sound he makes. While Atlas promises to reveal the true meaning behind Zeno's name, the cruel man whispers into the boy's ear that his name actually means disposable sword. All the surrounding soldiers burst into loud laughter, mocking the young warrior's pathetic loyalty. Next, a violent kick strikes the young man, shoving him mercilessly into the cold dirt. Zeno falls face first onto the bloody ground, feeling the sting of betrayal devour what little strength he has left in his final thoughts. He reflects that he dedicated his entire life and his precious blade to that man. Even knowing the terrible truth, he realizes how foolish he was for giving himself entirely to his master. Zeno's arm completely loses its vigor and slumps lifelessly into the pool of blood that formed around him. Suddenly, the nearby soldier startles upon realizing that something strange is about to happen. Even without strength in his arms, the young man bites down on his own blade with his teeth and tries to invoke his final technique. A last spark of golden energy glows intensely in his eyes, full of resentment and rage. However, his eyelids begin to feel heavy, and the glow in his gaze slowly fades away. Unable to finish his attack, Zeno's head falls lifelessly onto the bloody battlefield floor. Relieved that Zeno couldn't finish his strike, the enemy executioner lets out a sarcastic laugh and says he almost got a huge fright. Calling him a stupid monster, he raises his axe for the conclusive blow, while Zeno reflects that the first reason to live he ever received. The executioner tells the young man to meet his end once and for all, as the youth realizes he was only ever treated as a mere tool of war. The final strike is delivered before the entire army, sealing Zeno's tragic fate as someone who was used and thrown away. As the young warrior's consciousness fades into darkness, he wonders what he fought so hard for his entire life. Suddenly, he awakens feeling a warm sensation and finds himself looking at the crest of the Elminsters, the most powerful mages on the entire continent. A delicate, loving hand touches his body, while a sweet female voice joyfully celebrates that he has finally woken up. The boy opens his eyes and sees a beautiful blonde woman smiling tenderly, affectionately calling him her sweet baby. Zeno is in complete shock upon realizing that he is somehow reincarnated into the body of a tiny newborn. He tries to process the absurd situation of retaining his memories from his previous life while staring at the ceiling of that luxurious room. The boy stretches out his tiny, fragile hands, unable to believe what is happening to him. Even startled and confused, the tiny baby with glowing yellow eyes is cradled in the warm arms of his new mother. Zeno recalls that the empire was divided between House Arclight, focused on sword supremacy, and the prestigious Elminster family, who considered magical power to be the ultimate, supreme force in the world. Legend has it that the founder of the magical dynasty possessed an energy so vast it rivaled the brightness of the sun itself. Little Lucius finds it deeply ironic that he, someone who dedicated his entire life to the sword, was reborn into the rival family of mages. While pretending to sleep, the little boy begins to feel a mysterious, powerful, magical energy flowing smoothly throughout his tiny body. Astonished by the intensity of this flow, his eyes widen as he realizes the sheer scale of the power he now possesses. The boy focuses entirely on this incredible sensation of absolute power that he had never experienced before. He realizes that this vast, infinite spiritual energy is endlessly overflowing from his soul. The boy understands that this is the true, unimaginable power that his cruel former master always tried to suppress with magical potions. With a sly smile on his face, Lucius realizes that the heavens definitely haven't abandoned him after his unfair end. He is now in the perfect environment and carries the bloodline of the strongest magical lineage of all in his veins. The boy decides to use all that limitless spiritual energy and every resource at his disposal for a single objective. He solemnly swears to use every single drop of his new power to exact his long-awaited vengeance against Lord Atlas. However, to put his plan into motion, the baby first plans to gain absolute control over all the influence and power of his new family. Sometime later, little Lucius is surprised to be presented with a lavish feast prepared specifically for him. A large team of chefs and maids gathers before Lady Elminster to sweetly pamper the young heir with a massive smile on his face. The head chef opens a glowing pot and says he prepared that special meal exclusively for the boy. He excitedly explains that the special baby food was made with pure sap, harvested directly from the legendary world tree. Lucius feels a bit embarrassed when the chef asks him to open wide to try the magical food. Quickly, a maid interrupts and shows off a golden rattle, explaining that all the maids spent the night channeling spiritual energy into it. The young heir imagines the mansion's staff standing in a circle, channeling their magic into a simple baby toy. The chef and the maid start bickering over who gets more of the boy's attention, leaving him visibly uncomfortable with the situation. The baby flashes an awkward smile, trying to hide his discomfort in the face of so much flattery from the staff. His mother then sweetly steps in, asking everyone to calm down so they don't end up scaring little Lucius. She pats the little boy's head and asks if he agrees with her, leaving the heir lost in thought. In his mind, the boy warns himself not to be fooled by all that affectionate treatment from others. He reminds himself that deep down, he is still just the betrayed orphan from his past life. Lucius knows full well that all this overwhelming affection and attention is purely due to his immense magical potential. The boy recalls the terrible suffering he endured in his past life and refuses to build false hopes around other people's affection. He simply rolls over on the bed to make the maids happy, deciding he will merely use all this luxury to plot his revenge. During the night in the massive mansion, the boy reflects on the major discoveries he made in his first week after reincarnating, sitting comfortably on his giant, luxurious bed. He drinks his bottle while analyzing his new daily routine. Lucius acknowledges that the Elminster family's magical capabilities and creation techniques exceed all imagination. He realizes that even a simple bottle of milk is infused with an absurd amount of spiritual energy by the maids. The staff members end up completely exhausted after preparing the young master's special food. To top it off, the very lullabies sung by his mother carry the complex rules of magical incantations embedded within them. The heir crawls around the room holding his precious rattle under the proud, watchful eyes of the maids. Even though he finds it strange having to act like a helpless baby, Lucius knows this routine will make him an invincible mage. Alone in his crib, little Lucius decides that the perfect time has come to test the strength of his new powers. He remembers that the secret to his old technique, Phantom Shadow, lies in concentrating all energy into a single point. The boy plans to repeat the exact same process he used to perform with his sword in his past life. His goal is to bring every single drop of his current, massive magical energy under absolute control. With deep concentration, the little boy begins gathering the spiritual energy overflowing from his body. Suddenly, a gigantic beam of bluish light erupts from his tiny hands and shoots straight toward the ceiling. The massive pillar of magical energy pierces through the mansion and soars into the night sky, illuminating the night in a spectacular fashion. The sudden boom is so powerful that it startles the cooks, making them drop their pots onto the floor. In the hallway, the boy's mother and the maids run frantically as they feel the mansion's entire structure tremble. The shockwave of light spreads like a massive flash, illuminating the entire city surrounding the estate. Lying down, exhausted after the test, Lucius is impressed to see how much his power has grown in just 1 week. He realizes that this strength is unreal and plans to work hard to master it completely in the future. Before he can do anything else, the baby ends up closing his eyes from exhaustion and falls fast asleep. Meanwhile, Lady Elminster and the maids run as fast as they can toward the baby's nursery. The mother bursts into the room distraught and calls out for her son, worried about the deafening boom she just heard. To their surprise, the little heir's room is in complete silence with zero signs of danger. Seeing that Lucius is sleeping peacefully, the woman calms down and wonders if it was all just her imagination. She caresses the little boy's face and whispers, wondering what sweet dream the young heir must be having. The next day, the loving mother gently rocks the baby in her rocking chair near the sunny window. Suddenly, the maid Fran abruptly throws open the lounge doors, shouting frantically for her mistress. Visibly in a panic, the maid warns that she received terrible news regarding the approach of unexpected visitors. Maintaining her composure, Lady Elminster asks the staff member to calm down and explain what is going on. Fran reports that a delegation from the Royal Guard has just arrived, bringing an evaluator directly from the Imperial Court. The news intrigues Lucius, who wonders why an Imperial evaluator would come all the way to their territory. His mother is also worried about the unannounced visit, especially while the head of the family is away traveling. The boy quickly deduces that the Empire must have detected the massive burst of power he caused the previous night. The mansion's entire staff gathers in the Grand Main Hall to await the arrival of the Imperial delegation. Holding her son protectively, the family matriarch tries to conceal her obvious apprehension. The massive hall doors swing open, revealing mysterious figures cloaked in long black capes. The baby's mother stands with poise and elegance as the visitors march in her direction. Their solemn footsteps echo through the marble hall, further heightening the tense atmosphere in the room. Lucius closely observes every single detail of those shadowy figures who have just entered his new home. The hooded leader greets Lady Elminster in an extremely cold, emotionless voice. He says they can skip the formal pleasantries, as he came in person to deliver an urgent decree from the Emperor. The evaluator reveals that the Empire's spiritual surveillance network detected something extraordinary the previous night. He explains that a massive anomaly of spiritual energy, seen only once every 1,000 years, originated from this region. With his long, sharp nails, the man gestures and asserts that the source of this overwhelming power is right there. He guarantees that the energy detected by the Empire's devices came directly from inside that very mansion. The servants panic and whisper among themselves, trying to guess who could have caused such a phenomenon. The hooded man warns that if the evaluation determines that this mysterious source poses any danger, they will be obligated, in accordance with imperial law, to carry out an immediate purification process. The revelation about purification, which actually means elimination, leaves the maid Fran absolutely terrified. The mysterious leader approaches and claims that this harsh judgment is his group's sacred duty. He then displays a golden spherical artifact used to measure the intensity of people's energy. The evaluator begins channeling his magic into the device. Preparing to begin the search across the hall, he assures those present that the source of the thunderous power is definitely hidden in that location. The magical orb's gears begin to turn, emitting a metallic sound as they analyze the room. Suddenly, the device begins to glow intensely, pointing directly at a specific target. A beam of magical light shoots from the orb and hits little Lucius dead center in his mother's arms. The evaluator stares at the woman with a sharp gaze and calls out, confirming that the baby is the source of the power. The black-hooded man politely asks Lady Elminster to step forward so he can perform the test. Though apprehensive, she accepts the request and holds her beloved little boy tight against her chest before moving. The lady smiles calmly to reassure the frightened maid and gently hands little Lucius over to her care. Next, she steps forward with elegance toward the evaluator so he can measure her magical strength. The man positions the floating magical orb right before the woman, waiting for the mechanism to register her levels. To the man's surprise, the device begins to vibrate violently, revealing that the powerful energy actually isn't coming from her. Completely puzzled, the evaluator tries to comprehend where on earth that unreal spiritual pressure is coming from. Suddenly, the magical artifact glows with absurd intensity and begins sparking with heavy golden electrical arcs. The device goes completely out of control as its needles spin at high speeds due to magical overload. Next, a powerful, blinding beam shoots from the orb, violently crossing the mansion's entire hall. To everyone's astonishment, the light focuses perfectly on the tiny baby being held from afar by the maid. Without wasting a second, the hooded man marches quickly toward the little boy to inspect the artifact up close. As he approaches the boy, the man's eyes widen upon noticing that the orb's display is rapidly cracking. The sacred artifact simply cannot withstand the massive magical pressure passively emanating from the baby. In an instant, the orb violently explodes right in front of the man's face, scattering magical dust everywhere. Glass shards float in the air, while Lucius coldly observes the scene without showing a single trace of fear. Utterly baffled, the evaluator asks himself if the cause of that millennial anomaly could truly be a newborn baby. Lady Elminster and the other staff members freeze in shock at the violent destruction of the artifact. The man locks his attentive gaze onto the little boy's glowing golden eyes, sensing the immense danger he radiates. He mutters in horror that this is something completely impossible for an ordinary mage to comprehend. He tries to digest the fact that an indestructible treasure was shattered purely by the spiritual pressure of an infant. While the man freaks out in disbelief, little Lucius simply stares back at him with the serious, analytical gaze of his past life. Determined to dig deep into the mystery, the man announces he will connect his own soul directly to the boy's, activating a powerful magic circle. He plans to peer into the true nature hidden within the child's spirit. However, the moment he attempts the connection, the evaluator suffers a tremendous feedback shock that burns his hands with blue lightning. He screams in alarm as he feels the brutal resistance and immense weight emanating from the baby's spirit. The man insists on the reading spell and finally manages to glimpse the vastness of the young heir's soul. He is petrified to see that the sheer amount of energy there is so absurd that he cannot even reach the core of his soul. The evaluator feels that trying to read the boy's spirit is equivalent to staring directly into the brightness of the sun. However, amid that blazing golden light, he notices a dark, dangerous flame burning right at the center. The spell ends, and the worried mother immediately asks the man what he managed to see inside her son's spirit. Lady Elminster clasps her hands in distress, awaiting the final judgment of that authority figure. The man adopts a grave posture and explains that his group's duty is to strictly follow imperial directives. The man mentions a sacred book written at the founding of the dynasty that serves to prevent terrible prophecies from coming true. The cleric warns that this ancient scripture details the absolute worst calamity that could ever strike the empire. According to the text, the one who carries an abyssal curse inside a pure soul will bring total destruction and absolute darkness. He points at Lucius and asserts that the boy's soul aligns perfectly with the sacred book's dire prophecy. The mother falls into utter despair and weeps profusely, begging that it cannot possibly be true. The evaluator coldly states that this curse is the trigger for ruin and decrees the verdict in the name of the imperial family. Claiming he must nip the evil in the bud before it blossoms, he orders his guards forward to execute the baby. As the men step forward, the boy's mother lowers her head and assumes an imposing, resolute stance. Lucius notices his mother's sudden shift in behavior, curious to see what the woman's reaction to this threat will be. The imperial guards stretch out their hands, preparing to snatch the little boy from the maid's protective arms. The soldier's leader is already gripping the hilt of his sword, ready to strike anyone who dares interfere with their duty. At that moment, Lady Elminster steps in front of everyone and firmly commands the men to halt immediately. A massive quantity of pink energy feathers begins floating around her, unleashing her magnificent magical aura. She manifests gorgeous wings of brilliant light behind her back and solemnly warns that she will not let them lay a finger on her son. With glowing yellow eyes, the mother shows fierce determination to protect the baby with her very life. The evaluator is stunned by her audacity and angrily asks if she is truly willing to defy imperial law itself. The woman proudly replies that a single tear from her little boy carries far more weight than any law of the Empire. Lady Elminster stares down the soldiers with firm resolve and says that this protective instinct is exactly what it means to be a mother. In the maid's arms, little Lucius is deeply moved and surprised to witness such an incredible display of maternal love. The Imperial Evaluator remains undaunted and sternly asks if she is truly prepared to suffer the severe consequences. The atmosphere becomes intensely strained as two immense magical forces collide in the middle of the grand hall. The man gazes into the unyielding resolve in the mother's eyes and realizes she will fight to the death to protect the baby. After a few seconds of silence, the evaluator surprises everyone by slowly dissipating the dark energy from his claws. The accompanying royal guards are left utterly confused by their leader's sudden change of heart. One of the soldiers indignantly asks if he truly intends to ignore the law and let that anomaly escape alive. The thoughtful man ponders that, while the law dictates nipping evil in the bud, the situation here is quite different. He reflects on whether a sprout cultivated with so much love could truly turn into a calamity for the Empire. The boy's mother and the maid, Fran, observe the man in silence, alert to any suspicious movement on his part. The evaluator looks in Lucius's direction and announces he has made the decision to personally monitor the child's fate. The man locks a serious gaze onto the baby, while Lucius stares right back at him with his sharp, intelligent yellow eyes. He turns to the matriarch, calling her Lady Celestia, the influential daughter of the Duke of that region. The evaluator states she proved herself willing to turn against imperial law itself just to defend her little boy. With a gentler expression, the cleric closes his eyes and announces he has decided to align with their cause from this moment on. Hearing the man's unexpected decision, Celestia sighs in relief, though cold sweat still trickles down her face. However, the man sternly warns that if the boy strays from the proper path in the future, both of them will pay the price together. The evaluator begins withdrawing from the hall alongside his guards, asking if the terms are crystal clear to her. He casts one last glance back before stepping through the door, sternly warning her never to forget their agreement. The hall's heavy wooden doors slam shut with a loud thud, restoring absolute silence to the mansion. Lady Celestia remains standing in the center of the massive hall, trying to process the end of that terrifying confrontation. Feeling the weight of the stress finally lift, the woman wears an expression of sheer exhaustion and immense relief. Her legs completely give out, and she collapses to her knees on the marble floor from the overwhelming release of tension. The lady frantically runs over to the maid to take her beloved son back into her warm embrace. She hugs little Lucius tightly and begins sobbing uncontrollably, thanking the heavens that he is safe and sound. Still startled by his mother's intense reaction, the little boy focuses his glowing yellow eyes on her tear-stained face. The maid gently supports the lady while she remains kneeling on the floor, weeping with joy for having saved her son's life. Tears stream down the woman's face relentlessly, revealing the immense anguish she had been holding inside. She holds Lucius tenderly against her chest, whispering sweet words of comfort while smiling through her tears. The boy nestles against her shoulder and realizes just how warm and genuine this family's sincere love really is. Outside, one of the guards asks the evaluator if it was truly the right choice to spare that child's life. The man smiles and tells the soldier to report to the Emperor that they found an incredible talent who will bring great benefits in the future. 12 years pass since that tense day, and young Lucius now actively trains his incredible magical abilities. The youth concentrates in the middle of a training room while surrounded by multiple beams of purple energy. Lucius masterfully dodges each high-speed magical attack with swift, precise movements. He floats atop an unstable platform and thinks to himself that he needs to train even harder to reach the peak of his power. The young man believes that pushing his mind to the limit through extreme training is the absolute best way to grow stronger. To him, the closer he gets to a real life-threatening situation, the better his magical development becomes. The boy balances perfectly on the small wooden plank suspended by iron chains. In this perilous manner, Lucius manages to refine and sublimate his vast spiritual energy to unbelievable levels. Panting from physical fatigue, the young mage tries to calm his heart rate after completing yet another brutal set of exercises. He sits down exhausted on the suspended platform to catch his breath after so much intense exertion. At that moment, his mother and the maid, Fran, quietly enter the training area, calling out to him with concern. Celestia affectionately scolds him for subjecting himself once again to such a dangerous training routine. Hearing his mother's sweet voice, the young man immediately stands up and wipes the sweat from his face. With a gentle smile, the boy reassures his mother, stating that he feels completely fine. Lucius reminds her that he has been practicing this exact same intense training routine every single day for 12 years. Despite the young man's confident words, his mother and the maid Fran continue staring at him with deeply anxious expressions. The boy then leaps off the suspended platform and glides smoothly down to the floor. Cushioned by a light gust of wind, Lucius lands gracefully on the training hall's marble floor, right in front of his mother and the maid. With a confident smile, the young man attempts to ease their worries after his risky exercise routine. Fran begins scolding him hysterically, shouting that dropping one's guard is extremely dangerous, and recounting how she nearly perished 3 times back when she was a mage. The youth simply nods along with a chuckle to end the maid's lecture, while his mother watches the scene, thoroughly amused. He reflects on the 12 years that have passed, and the grueling routine he endured to forge his new body. The maid then regains her composure and respectfully addresses him as young master to deliver something important. She formally extends her arms and asks him to accept a mysterious sealed envelope that has just arrived for him. Lucius carefully takes the envelope. Noting the green wax seal safeguarding the official message, the boy pulls the letter out of the envelope under the attentive, curious gazes of his mother and the maid. Upon reading the contents, a sly, vengeance-filled smile spreads across the young heir's face. It is an invitation to the selection ceremony of the Royal Academy, the gathering place for the Empire's greatest prodigies. He knows full well that the student who graduates as the top candidate of that prestigious institution will receive a sacred blessing capable of transcending human capabilities, something Lord Atlas himself received in the past. The young man recalls the overwhelming power of his former executioner, who was capable of shattering magical barriers with his bare hands. Atlas possessed surreal, incomprehensible abilities, making him a virtually invincible opponent back then. Zeno had always observed that power up close, knowing he would need something extraordinary if he ever wanted to face him on equal footing. Lucius crumples the paper with determination, fully aware that he needs that royal blessing to defeat his former master. To achieve his goal of revenge, the boy resolves to become the #1 student at that military academy, no matter what it takes. The scene shifts to the imposing structure of the Royal Academy and its grand coliseum packed with spectators. Lady Celestia and the maid Fran take their noble seats in the stands to watch the grand event up close. The young heir walks calmly through the arena alongside dozens of other nervous candidates taking the test. The nobility and common citizens fill the stands, eager to witness the performance of the new generation of mages. Lucius maintains total focus, staring at the center of the arena with his glowing, highly confident yellow eyes. Suddenly, a commanding voice echoes across the entire Colosseum, calling for absolute silence to begin the event. The Academy's high priest rises and solemnly announces that the selection ceremony is about to begin right after. The iron gates swing open to reveal a massive, terrifying beast known as the Crystal Lizard. The cleric reinforces that the official exam for the prestigious institution's new students will start at this exact moment. The young Elminster gazes seriously at the giant magical creature, analyzing the trial ahead. A massive containment barrier opens in the arena while the examiner explains the complex rules of the test. This year's test will require the young candidates to display a perfect blend of defensive and suppression skills. The candidates must ensure the absolute safety of several floating eggs scattered across the combat arena. While defending the eggs, they must simultaneously use magic to subdue the magical creature's fierce attacks. The examiner warns that each candidate's final score will be automatically evaluated by an artifact floating above them. The sacred device in question is known to all students there as the Scales of Judgment. The artifact will weigh their defensive abilities in protecting the eggs against their offensive power used against the magical beast. Based on these 2 criteria, magical weights will be added to each pan, determining the student's pass or fail status according to the total weight. The cleric concludes the instructions and orders all candidates to head immediately to the arena's waiting area. Upon entering the waiting locker room, Lucius begins drawing attention and whispering stares from other young men. The boys mock him behind his back, whispering that he is the famous cursed orphan who was almost executed by imperial evaluators in the past. They continue spreading spiteful rumors, claiming the young man would already be gone if not for the mercy shown 12 years ago. The young heir completely ignores the noble's insults and continues walking in silence with a calm expression. The official announcer declares that the day's first challenger will be young Lilia Magnate, who enters the arena wrapped in flames. The redhead stares down the crystal lizard with fury and yells at the creature to burn to ashes. She unleashes a massive blast of fire at the monster, creating a huge barrier of roaring flames in the arena. The devastating attack consumes the monster, earning her top marks in suppression but a low score in protection. The scales of judgment balance out, and the magic display registers that the young woman passed her test. Lilia turns her back on the defeated creature with disdain, annoyed that she didn't achieve the flawless performance she wanted. The announcer calls the next candidate, who enters the arena using dark binding magic to restrain the magical beast. The young man focuses his efforts on trapping the crystal lizard while protecting the floating eggs around him. The scales calculate his performance and declare him passed with an excellent defense score and an average attack score. The announcer calls the next candidate, who enters the arena using wind magic to defend himself while attempting to protect the floating eggs. Next, another candidate steps forward in the arena, channeling a brilliant lance of light to strike the monster. Yet another young woman displays her talent by concentrating pure magical energy in her hands, successfully securing her passing mark on the exam. The announcer then introduces Hector Gilbert, causing the crowd to whisper excitedly as they recognize the young lord. One of the boys in the crowd comments that rumors say Hector is the prodigy of the new generation of imperial swordsmen. Lucius observes his rival, thinking that the Gilbert family is a noble bloodline he had never heard of in his past life. Hector stares at the massive monster, thinking he has no need for the boring tricks mages usually rely on to fight. He charges forward at high speed, intending to use his prestigious family's exclusive sword style. The young lord firmly grips the hilt of his weapon, channeling intense red energy directly into the blade. With a ruthless gaze, he focuses on the idea that his technique exists solely to slice through the target quickly and silently with a swift motion. Hector delivers a devastating slash that cleaves the air and strikes the creature dead center. The attack's impact generates a massive fissure of red energy that slices the entire arena in two. Hector turns around calmly, but one of the floating eggs ends up sliced in half by the strike's residual power. The golden pans of the scales of judgment begin moving to calculate the candidate's final performance. The gigantic creature slumps defeated onto the arena floor, completely subdued by the force of the physical attack. The official evaluation indicates maximum suppression levels and a high protection score, putting Hector at the top of the leaderboard. The other candidates are shocked by the speed of the strike, commenting that they could barely blink in time to see it. The announcer calls the day's final candidate, and Lucius Elminster walks calmly toward the center of the Colosseum. The nobles in the stands begin whispering with contempt, calling the boy the cursed Elminster child. One man comments that, after Hector's incredible performance, Lucius's test won't even serve as decent entertainment. Hector watches his opponent enter with an arrogant smirk, confident that his score won't be surpassed. The crystal lizard gets back up and begins charging a powerful, glowing magical attack aimed straight at the blonde youth lady. Celestia watches everything deeply worried alongside Fran, while Lilia also observes the start of combat. The beast fires an overwhelming torrent of purple flames, covering almost the entire area where the boy is standing. The bishop asks the headmaster how he expects a first-year student to handle such a devastating area of effect attack. The headmaster explains that the standard approach would be to raise a wide-area defensive barrier to safeguard all the eggs. Without showing a single trace of fear, Lucius focuses his glowing yellow eyes on the torrent of energy cascading toward him. Suddenly, a line of white energy cuts through the air and deflects the purple attack, leaving the magical creature completely baffled. The evaluators in the stands are left jaw-dropped. Watching the scene, unable to comprehend what just happened, Lucius begins dodging with light, elegant acrobatics, deflecting every dangerous projectile far away from the sage eggs. He performs another acrobatic maneuver in midair, repelling another sequence of energy blasts with pinpoint precision. The headmaster watches that display of skill from high up in the tower, muttering under his breath that the whole thing is unbelievable. He notes that Lucius isn't reciting spells, but rather manipulating pure spiritual energy with absurd, millimeter-precise control. The headmaster thinks to himself that the boy looks as if he is snatching every individual raindrop out of a heavy storm. Still upside down in midair, the young heir prepares to finish his impressive sequence of movements. With a simple, subtle tap of his fingers, the youth releases a tiny spark of blue light that shines brilliantly. The massive sphere of magic accumulated inside the monster's mouth begins to crack under massive internal pressure. Supported by only one hand on the ground, Lucius channels his spiritual energy directly against the beast's weak point. A beam of blue light crosses the arena and strikes the beast's throat, while the youth mentally issues a firm command for it to halt. Under the weight of that massive spiritual pressure, the dragon freezes completely, and Lucius lands softly on his feet. Absolute silence sweeps across the entire Colosseum, while the gigantic crystal reptile remains completely unable to move. Suddenly, the heavy golden pieces of the judgment artifact begin dropping onto the measurement pans. The audience of nobles turns pale in astonishment, unable to comprehend the ease with which the boy dominated the situation. Dozens of golden weights rapidly pile up on one side of the scale, indicating an absurd score. On the opposite pan, the blue artifacts representing defense also stack up rapidly in massive quantities. The center of the scale begins trembling violently, glowing with an intensely bright golden light. The aristocrats widen their eyes and shout in disbelief as they realize the magnitude of the emerging score. Lilia grinds her teeth in frustration, sweat pouring down her face as she watches the weights float up endlessly with his back to the audience. Lucius simply watches calmly as the final weight rises toward the evaluation artifact. The artifact finally stabilizes, brilliantly displaying the ultimate triple S rank for the young mage. The sacred artifact glows intensely, confirming the maximum score of S+ in both defense and suppression. With this unprecedented feat, Lucius Elminster is officially declared the top incoming student of the year. The crowd erupts into thunderous applause and cheers following the boy's incredible performance. Lady Celestia cries tears of emotion, covering her face, while Fran cheers loudly for the young master's great achievement. Hector grips the armrests of his chair tightly, unable to contain his massive frustration at being surpassed. Hector's face darkens completely with rage, and he bites his own lip until it nearly bleeds. Lucius maintains a calm, indifferent composure, acting as though this result was merely expected. The high priest steps onto the center of the stage and announces he will present the Medal of Honor to the class's top student. The young Elminster stands out among the other students, solemnly awaiting the conclusion of the ceremony. The priest gazes at the boy with seriousness, maintaining the imposing posture required for such a solemn moment. A beautiful silver medal featuring a green crystal emerges, floating amidst a gentle current of wind magic. Lucius fixes his gaze on the glowing artifact descending slowly toward him. On one knee, the boy receives the prestigious medal, which is pinned carefully onto his student uniform. The young heir closes his eyes for a brief moment to absorb the significance of that milestone. The headmaster takes the floor and declares the awards ceremony officially closed. He concludes by saying that, starting the next day, everyone's long-awaited academic life will finally begin. A voice instructs the newcomers to head to the right and check the bulletin boards to find their respective rooms. Fran timidly clears her throat, trying to hold back her tears as she bids farewell to the young master. The maid tearfully laments that she won't be able to accompany his daily life, but assures him the servants will eagerly await his growth. Fran explains that the other staff members asked her to deliver this message, and Lucius asks her to thank everyone, promising to do his absolute best. Celestia gently cups her son's face, asking with a sweet gaze if he is truly leaving already. She presses her forehead against his and says that even though she asks him not to push himself too hard, she knows he won't listen, so she will simply pray for his safety. The boy's mother kindly asks him never to forget that there are many people cheering for him back home. Lucius offers a soft, comforting smile, reassuring his mother by saying he completely understands her feelings. The boy decides it is time to depart and asks Fran to take great care of his beloved mother while he is away. As he takes his first steps, Lucius thinks to himself that claiming top spot on the entrance exam was a great starting point toward becoming valedictorian. Someone screams in total shock upon encountering one of the academy's luxurious dormitories that looks just like a palace. By contrast, another student building appears dreary, ancient, and wrapped in a dismal atmosphere. Lilia complains furiously about being placed in a basic shared room, while her roommate plays chess and tells her to calm down. The girl with glasses sighs and asks Lilia not to burn the place down, given that the redhead is literally venting flames of anger knocking over a chess piece. The young woman remarks that the best part about this institution is the constant opportunity to snatch the top spot at any moment. The scene cuts to a spacious classroom, with various students seated at their desks, ready for their first lesson. The surrounding students keep whispering insults, suggesting the boy must have cheated using forbidden magic to pass. A female student timidly ponders whether the cursed boy might simply be insanely talented. Hector thinks to himself in annoyance that the rumors are nonsense, and that Lucius's performance was nothing more than a cheap trick. Lucius completely ignores the murmurs of contempt, while Hector continues glaring holes into his rival from afar. From the hallway window, a mysterious hooded silhouette closely monitors the movement inside the classroom. The mysterious man in dark robes stands atop a tower, holding a book with authority. In the room, a student warns that the teacher is coming, leaving Lilia confused by the sudden shift in atmosphere. Hector still boasts internally, thinking that in a real battle, his sword would have done far more damage. the hooded man appears out of nowhere behind him, commanding the young lord to wipe that useless urge to fight from his mind. Hector startles at the stranger's sudden proximity and feels a heavy magical pressure emanating from him. Refusing to back down, Hector arrogantly states he doesn't know him and has zero obligation to listen to him. The young lord mocks the man, asking if he thought he could intimidate him with just a cheap magic trick. Other students take the chance to laugh and whisper that the man lacks the dignity expected of an Empire-certified tutor. The hooded professor lets out a heavy sigh, keeping most of his expression concealed beneath the shadows. He raises a hand with long, sharp nails toward Hector, calmly warning that he will say this only once. The man channels a mysterious blue aura into his fingers and coldly mutters for the hostility to be erased for good. A massive wave of physical and magical pressure crushes the entire classroom, violently pinning the students against their desks. Hector struggles with all his might not to collapse, desperately wondering where that crushing weight preventing him from breathing is coming from. Lilia swallows hard, her eyes wide with terror, thinking to herself that this instructor is a true monster. Meanwhile, Lucius remains calm, analyzing that the professor is extraordinarily strong to maintain that level of fine control. The instructor dispels the spell and coldly warns everyone that they would do well to remember that display of power. He slowly begins walking down the classroom aisle, warning them that in the academic life starting today, the man firmly emphasizes that their bloodlines or the prestige of their family names. The students remain trembling and pale at their desks, not daring to make a single sound. Hold absolutely zero importance or utility within this renowned institution. His sharp eyes gaze coldly at the class as he gestures slowly with his long nails. With his back to the class, he reinforces that individual strength is the only metric that truly matters here. The instructor fixes a piercing glare on the youths, making it clear he will not tolerate weakness of any kind. Lucius continues observing the professor analytically, while the man cracks a faint, enigmatic smile. With a serious expression, the tutor announces it is finally time to begin their very first lesson of the year. Sitting behind his teacher's desk, he formally introduces himself to everyone, stating his name is Valerius. He explains he is the professor responsible for teaching the foundational theory of magic at the academy. Lucius narrows his eyes and focuses his attention on the instructor as he remembers a very crucial detail. The young heir remembers that Valerius was the exact same imperial evaluator present at his birth. He finds it interesting that an imperial envoy is a professor here. Acknowledging that the man's spiritual energy is fantastic, Valerius raises his hand and states that before anything else, he will begin by teaching the school's strict rules. The instructor projects a bright, magical light and declares that everyone's ultimate goal here is to graduate as the top student. He activates a massive holographic crystal panel, explaining that the screen displays the official ranking with student placements. He clarifies that scores are based on marks from classes and missions, pointing out that Lucius currently holds 45th place right after. Hector's name appears on the screen just below his rival, occupying position number 51. The professor warns that the numbers update in real time, and Lilia flies into a rage upon seeing she was placed 72nd. Valerius explains that to graduate at the top, students must climb into the overall top 16 ranks. Only then will they be eligible to compete in the Academy's Grand Dueling Tournament, which takes place only once every 4 years. He adds that the grand winner of the tournament secures the title of top student and receives a very special imperial blessing. Upon hearing about the imperial blessing, Lucius quietly clenches his fist under his school desk. One of the students stands up, startled, complaining that it's absurd to have to stay at the top for 4 straight years without a break. At that exact moment, the young man hears an audio chime and is horrified to see his ranking plummet drastically down to 400. The panel continues updating his score in real time, driving the boy even further down the school ranking. Valerius warns that complaints and whining are also evaluated negatively, cautioning the young man to watch what he says. The instructor smiles wickedly, explaining that once a year, the 125 students with the lowest scores will be summarily expelled from the prestigious military and magical academy. Regardless of the reason, Hector silently reflects that this extreme rule is the ruthless method the school uses to filter out only the best students. Valerius holds out his hand to the youths, asking if everyone has finally grasped the gravity of the rules here. Without wasting time, the tutor gestures with glowing blue energy and announces the immediate start of their first practical lesson. A massive portal of dark smoke and shadows erupts in the middle of the classroom, terrifying the newcomers with the unleashed power. Lilia widens her eyes in confusion, screaming in disbelief as to whether the professor is using teleportation magic on day 1. Hector observes the massive amount of accumulated mana, thinking in horror that this man is truly a terrifying monster. In a fraction of a second, the entire class is transported to a mysterious outdoor area surrounded by dense fog. Lucius quickly takes a firm stance, while Lilia and the rest of the students try to recover from the shock of teleportation. In front of them stands a long, floating stone bridge glowing with various greenish magical runes. Valerius stands among the top students and declares that this will officially be their very first practical lesson. He stares at the young students with an impassive expression, briefly warning that the task to complete is simple. Taking his first step onto the structure, he announces that everyone has a maximum deadline of 1 month to cross the bridge entirely. A few students whisper in relief, thinking the challenge is far too easy and will be an extremely simple task to complete. Driven by haste, 2 boys run toward the bridge's entrance, shouting that they will lead the crossing without any problems. Hector remains standing in place, gravely telling them to wait, catching the attention of a female classmate nearby. Ignoring the warning, the confident pair of students steps firmly onto the stone bridge's magical surface. The exact instant one of their feet touches the stone, an intense magical reaction begins emanating from beneath his boot sole. Immediately, a violent torrent of green energy wraps around the boy's body, leaving him completely paralyzed and in shock. The boy loses all strength and falls backward into the abyss, while Hector grabs the other classmate, telling him he'd better stop. The young lord completes the warning, stating he will suffer the exact same terrible fate if he dares take one more step forward. The unlucky student plummets into the deep darkness of the gorge, leaving everyone at the top in a total state of shock. Lilia approaches the edge in terror, asking what on earth is happening down there to those who fall off the bridge. Lucius calmly observes the scene from afar, thinking to himself that he has finally cracked the secret behind this test. He concludes that the stone bridge was enchanted specifically to siphon away all spiritual energy from whoever touches it. Valerius reinforces that his subject teaches that power is the foundation of everything, challenging the class to gather enough energy within 1 month. A terrified student raises his hand and calls out to the instructor. Looking extremely hesitant with a question about the test, the boy asks what the pass rate for this test has been in the past, and Valerius repeats the question enigmatically. The professor calmly answers that, in what is considered a normal year, the rate is usually around 20%. Suddenly, he pauses and lets out a sarcastic smile, apologizing for phrasing things incorrectly. He corrects his own statement, revealing that the number he previously mentioned was not the pass rate. He reveals with absolute coldness that 20% is actually the survival rate of the students who attempt the test. Despair takes hold of the group, with several students whispering helplessly, unsure of what to do other than attempt to boost their magic energy. Another boy frantically asks if it's even possible to expand one's spiritual capacity within such a short time frame of just 1 month. Hearing their complaints, Lucius thinks to himself that his classmates are focusing on the completely wrong detail. He analyzes that, given the absurd speed at which the bridge drains spiritual energy from anyone stepping on it, and the length of the bridge, it would be virtually impossible to cross even for someone possessing a massive quantity of mana. The boy concludes with a subtle smirk that the directive to hoard more spiritual power is merely a major distraction. With absolute confidence written all over his face, he thinks to himself that he has finally uncovered the true method to beat this test. The terrifying statistic of a 20% survival rate continues echoing inside the minds of every student present. The young man who asked the question trembles in terror, stammering that the professor must be joking about such a frightening rate. The students gaze down at the dark abyss, realizing that the classmate who just fell likely lost his life down there. Another female student panics, screaming that she doesn't want to perish in a simple class, declaring the task impossible to finish. A brown-haired boy gives up right then and there, deciding he will beg his mother to cancel his academy enrollment. Valerius coldly remarks that this is a wise choice, as those who give up in the face of an initial obstacle would certainly end up gone anyway the moment they were deployed to a real battlefield. The instructor takes his position on the opposite side, reinforcing that from this moment on, they have exactly 1 month to train. A golden clock emerges floating in the air, starting the official countdown from 29 days. Valerius turns his back on the group, authoritatively commanding everyone to begin training immediately. Lucius gazes at the bridge with a sharp, determined look, fully focused on unraveling the exercise's mystery. With only 20 days remaining on the counter, the students begin running through the forest carrying heavy wooden logs. The young men run with great difficulty, panting heavily under the massive physical load of the intense training. Lilia runs ahead of the group carrying a giant log on her shoulders, letting out shouts of pure fury and determination. One of the boys watches the redhead's terrifying resolve, commenting in fear that what she is doing is way too dangerous. Panting and drenched in sweat, she thinks to herself that she must drastically boost her physical strength and stamina. Under a light drizzle, the students continue their daily grind carrying extremely heavy sandbags on their shoulders. One of the young men screams in exhaustion upon realizing that the physical training's difficulty level just spiked again. Lilia manages to lift a colossal boulder with her bare arms, mentally reinforcing that she needs to lift 10 times her current body weight. With veins bulging on her forehead from extreme effort, the girl flashes an insane smile while keeping the massive rock elevated. Far from there, Hector rests his gloved hand on the forest ground, deciding that this secluded area is perfect for his training. He kneels in the middle of the clearing and locks his gaze onto the mist-covered mountains, channeling his absolute attention. The young swordsman maintains an unflinching posture, demonstrating absolute focus on what he is about to perform. He tosses a small black pebble forward while pondering the mechanics of the bridge in great detail. He theorizes that the bridge's drain effect likely only activates when the physical contact duration crosses a specific threshold. If the contact lasts too long, a dark curse is instantly applied to siphon away all of the target's magical energy. Based on this clever conclusion, he prepares to put an alternative strategy into practice. Hector nimbly draws his longsword, channeling a massive, blazing red aura around his body. With an explosive burst of momentum, he charges forward at high speed, leaving only a trail of red energy behind. Hector leaps and spins nimbly in midair, slicing through the winds to avoid touching the bridge for more than a single second. The young lord maintains an intent gaze, calculating every single footstep with extreme precision. With only 3 days remaining on the clock, Lucius remains seated motionless atop a rock in deep meditation. Lucius opens his eyes, knowing that the requirement to pass the test isn't raw, brute spiritual power. He understands that the main secret lies solely in the refined technique required to manipulate that power. The young man remembers that, in his past life, in order to fight using only a limited supply of mana, he had to master an extremely meticulous, precise control of his energy down to the most basic level of his cells. This mastery was achieved after years of grueling, repetitive training, as precise as threading a needle. It was thanks to this tireless effort that he managed to create and perfect his secret sword technique, Phantom Shadow. During that painful process, he frequently coughed up blood from exhaustion due to the extreme wear and tear on his own body. The heir nearly lost his life multiple times throughout those rigorous training sessions in his quest to perfect his magic. He concludes that applying this exact same refined control from his past life to his current magic would be an extremely simple task. Two students whisper, mocking Lucius for merely meditating, suggesting the boy gave up or used money to cheat on the entrance exam. They call him a spoiled, cursed child, declaring that his journey is over, all under the watchful eye of a mysterious figure. The cloaked individual remains standing in the forest, silently observing Lucius's silhouette, meditating atop the rock. With only 2 days left until the deadline, Lilia and her roommate continue training hard to strengthen their bodies. On the penultimate day, Hector exhaustively trains his slashing techniques, slicing through the air with lightning-fast, precise strikes. He finishes training with a confident smile on his face, feeling completely prepared to take on the bridge's challenge. The final day finally arrives, and the students gather nervously before the bridge where Lucius remains seated. Lilia glares at Lucius in irritation. Bothered by the top student's seemingly indifferent attitude, she angrily asks herself if the prodigy truly gave up on fighting and spent the entire month just sitting on the ground doing nothing. The golden magical clock ticks down the final seconds, showing that the 30-day time limit is about to expire. With only 1 second remaining, the blonde heir cracks a subtle, satisfied smile and prepares to take action. The moment the timer hits 0, Valerius appears at the start of the bridge wrapped in dense, terrifying purple smoke. The instructor lands gracefully in front of all the students, formally announcing that the promised deadline has officially ended. He observes the class positioned at the opposite end of the gorge. Analyzing the nervous expression on everyone's face, Valerius asks to see the results of their training, challenging the group by asking who will be the first brave soul to attempt the crossing. Hector and Lilia step forward with commanding postures, while most of the other students back away, terrified of the danger. Among the less prepared students, a tense mood of hesitation sets in, with everyone wondering who will take the first step. Two boys begin arguing and shoving each other, demanding the courage their classmate boasted about the previous day. Suddenly, Hector and Lilia step forward in unison, demonstrating that they are ready for the challenge. Both prodigies declare at the same time that they will be responsible for initiating the dangerous bridge crossing. Hector coldly claims he was faster, but Lilia gets annoyed and snaps back, asking if he has gone deaf. The swordsman calmly insists on going first, but the redhead demands they settle the order with rock, paper, scissors to keep it fair. Lucius watches the duo's silly argument with a subtle, amused smirk. Lilia loudly celebrates her victory in rock, paper, scissors, while Hector grows frustrated at losing the game of chance. One of the young men in the back anxiously mentions that he trained insanely hard all month for this exact moment. However, the overconfident boy ignores turn order and rushes past Lilia, shouting that he will be the pioneer to cross the pair charges forward without authorization, leaving Lilia furious for having wasted her time playing rock, paper, scissors for nothing. The moment both boys' boots touch the bridge floor, purplish magical energy begins surging from beneath their feet. Within seconds, a violent wave of dark curse swallows both boys, who begin screaming in sheer agony. Hector watches the duo's inevitable failure with disdain, muttering under his breath that they were absolute fools. Completely weakened and drained of magic energy, the three challengers lose their balance and plunge straight into the abyss. Another young man drops to his knees on the bridge, consumed by shadowy smoke, furiously lamenting that his power should have been enough. Watching that scene of despair, the remaining students begin realizing that attempting to cross that way is utterly useless. Instructor Valerius watches everything impassively, aware that the correct answer to the test doesn't rely on brute force. The secret is to refine internal energy at a speed superior to the bridge's drain, continuously overcoming the curse. Mastering the core fundamentals of spiritual energy, refinement through practice is the only real method to pass the exam. Valerius taunts the students on the other side of the bridge, asking what's wrong and why none of them have managed to cross yet. A black-haired boy yells back that the question is absurd, since every single one of them will perish if they fall down there. Lilia aggressively shoves one of the hesitant boys aside, screaming at them to get out of her way. The young mage positions herself alone in front of the floating bridge, taking a deep breath to prepare for the crossing. Lilia closes her eyes for a brief moment, concentrating intensely to tune her power with the environment. Upon opening her eyes, her pupils glow like intense flames, revealing her fierce resolve to win the test. She takes her first step onto the stone bridge, encasing her entire body in a living barrier of blazing flames. Lilia charges forward full speed, releasing an absurd quantity of fire magic to combat the ground's drain. Valerius observes her from the other side, mentally admitting that her spiritual energy capacity is impressive, but bit by bit, her flames begin to flicker and weaken. As the purple curse mist begins creeping up her legs, Lilia begins stumbling halfway through, feeling her body grow heavy as the curse siphons her stamina. The professor reflects that, against a curse that relentlessly siphons the target's available mana directly. Even dropping to her knees, the redhead refuses to give up, slamming her fist against the bridge floor to unleash an eruption of flames. Valerius turns his head, slightly surprised upon noticing the girl's unusual persistence in the face of extreme fatigue. Panting and furious, she screams at herself, and the bridge not to underestimate her on this cruel test. She unleashes a hurricane of flames around herself, swearing she won't lose to a stupid obstacle like this bridge. Her boot slams hard onto the bridge stone, generating a heavy impact propelled by the heat of her magic. Valerius thinks to himself, impressed, that she managed to unleash so much magic through sheer force of will that the drain couldn't keep up. Lilia finally crosses the finish line and rushes past the professor, successfully reaching solid ground on the other side. The moment she hits the grass, her flames extinguish completely, and she collapses onto the ground, exhausted from the Herculean effort. Lying flat on her back in the grass, she pants heavily while the tutor observes her with his usual cold expression. Even without the strength to move, the young redhead flashes a proud, victorious smile directed at the instructor. Valerius calmly announces that she has passed the test, prompting Lilia to celebrate with clenched fists even while lying down. Observing her classmate's success, Hector lets out a dismissive sigh, analyzing the situation with superiority. He deems Lilia's method extremely inefficient, thinking that such exhaustion would only handicap her in future battles. Hector locks his analytical gaze onto the structure, reflecting that, based on what he was able to observe, before the stone bridge's drain spell actually begins siphoning the power of whoever steps on it, there is a tiny delay window that occurs immediately after initial contact with the surface. The youth firmly grips the hilt of his silver sword, concluding that if that is the case, The only thing he needs to do is be fast enough not to give the curse any time to act. With formidable momentum, Hector launches himself forward like red lightning, shocking everyone with his speed. His feet barely touch the ground as he sprints, arrogantly thinking that his technique wouldn't be affected by a silly curse. Reaching the far end, he delivers a powerful horizontal slash with his sword to cut the wind and slow his momentum. Hector lands with total balance and elegance, maintaining a cool composure without showing any signs of fatigue. Valerius mentally acknowledges the intelligence behind the boy's swift strategy to bypass the drain, but considers one issue. The instructor remarks that attempting to strike the teacher is unacceptable, and Hector fires back, asking him to drop the false accusations and focus on the grade. The professor confirms that he passed on his first try, and the young Lord Arrogance replies that it was obvious. The students in the rear comment in shock that Hector's movement was far too fast for their eyes to keep up with. Lilia observes Hector intently, silently acknowledging her direct class rival's exceptional talent. Suddenly, the murmurs restart as everyone notices that Lucius has finally stood up and is walking toward the bridge. His classmates watch him suspiciously, doubting the cursed boy's ability to replicate Hector's feat. They whisper, pointing out that Lucius doesn't seem to possess that much mana, nor the ability to use high-speed physical reinforcement like Hector did. Valerius fixes his gaze on the blonde youth, mentally wondering what the Elminster heir will display at this moment. Lucius takes his first step onto the stone bridge, releasing subtle sparks of blue energy around his boots. The students at the edge watch in terror as they see the young man walk with absolute tranquility, completely unaffected by the drain. Lilia watches with gritted teeth, starting to admit that his top score on the entrance exam wasn't mere luck. Suffering zero interference from the purple smoke, Lucius walks with firm, resolute steps toward the end of the bridge. Hector dismisses Lucius's style as boring, but Valerius realizes that this is the absolute perfect answer from someone who truly understood the drain. The blonde boy takes his final step and steps softly onto the grass on the other side, completing the crossing flawlessly. Valerius watches him walk past in silence, thinking to himself that perhaps he was expecting too much from the young prodigy right after. Another student manages to cross on his knees and shouts with joy, celebrating the fruits of his hard training. The boy shouts to the class that everyone can cross normally, making Valerius look back in surprise. Excited by the revelation, the other students sprint across the bridge, joyfully celebrating their successful training. Lilia surprisingly admits that everyone is quite capable, but Hector dismisses them, calling them fools who only gain confidence in a herd. Valerius fixes a grave gaze on the celebrating crowd, thinking to himself that something is terribly wrong here. The instructor realizes in shock that this sudden change in the floating bridge is actually the handiwork of young Lucius Elminster. He deduces that, at the exact same time the boy was performing his own energy refinement to cross, he injected a minuscule amount of mana, just enough so that the curse within the bridge's complex magic circuits wouldn't trigger. It was an extremely ancient, powerful seal that had never been undone or bypassed in over 1,000 years of history. Suddenly, a deafening crack echoes through the area, making all the students and the professor turn toward the bridge in terror. Hector and Lilia realize in horror that Lucius managed to simply nullify and dispel the curse's magical formula itself. Right after, the bridge's entire stone structure explodes in a massive destructive discharge of blue lightning bolts. Lucius simply watches the magical spark fade from his fingers with complete indifference as the debris plummets into the depths below. The students stare at the smoke, terrified, muttering that young Elminster is a monster and that they never imagined he would go this far. The professor cracks a dark smile of approval while looking at the boy, who maintains his serene posture with eyes closed. One of the foolish students in class wonders if the historic stone bridge simply broke from being old and worn out. Another boy sighs in relief, commenting that if they had delayed even 1 second longer on the bridge, they would have perished. The young men celebrate, saying it was a close call, but the important thing is that everyone there managed to secure a passing grade. However, one of the more observant students looks back with a worried, thoughtful expression regarding those who fell. He laments for the classmates who fell first, remembering that they were also pushing themselves to the absolute limit in training. Everyone turns their gaze back to instructor Valerius, who remains standing imposing near the destroyed edge. The professor snaps his long fingers in the air and tells the surviving youths not to worry about those who were eliminated. At that exact moment, the students who had plunged into the abyss emerge floating safely, encased in bubbles of purple mana. The boy who was lamenting shouts in absolute shock upon realizing that all his fallen classmates are alive and well. The professor turns to the assembled class and solemnly announces that every single student present in that forest has officially passed without issue on the Academy's first fundamental exam. A young female student asks in confusion if the classmates who fell off the floating bridge shouldn't have failed the test. He explains that he evaluated everyone's aura cultivation, but reveals that the true purpose of the test was to judge each individual's determination. The fallen students are warmly embraced by their classmates, displaying a strong spirit of unity and collective relief. The tutor highlights that, even facing the peril of death up close, not a single one of them ran away, and all chose to meet the test head-on. He asserts that this indomitable spirit will become a weapon far greater and more powerful than any natural talent. Lilia and the other boys smile proudly upon hearing the words of praise and encouragement from their strict professor. Hector walks silently alongside the others, reflecting deeply on the true meaning of today's exercise. Gazing up at the overcast sky, Valerius declares that the brave step they took today holds immeasurable value for their future. The students gather in the clearing with relieved, proud expressions over the first major victory of their careers. The strict instructor cracks a subtle smirk and formally congratulates the entire class on passing. As a comforting light shines in the sky, he concludes by saying he is genuinely proud of everyone's performance. Lilia smiles with confidence and swagger, feeling fully rewarded for all her hard work during daily training. Lucius stays back and remains calm in the background, while the mysterious hooded figure continues watching him from afar. The young heir focuses his sharp gaze on his surroundings. Knowing that the upcoming stages at the academy will be even harder, Valerius takes the lead before the class once again, catching everyone's attention with a tone of voice that signals an important announcement. The professor warns that passing and evaluation are distinct matters, announcing he will reveal the class's new ranking right now. He reveals that Lucius Elminster has now climbed the overall leaderboard, officially holding 45th place in the school. Lucius hears the result with absolute serenity, maintaining his calm posture without showing any sign of surprise. A boy whispers indignantly, questioning if the blonde hadn't just calmly walked across the bridge without exerting any effort. Another classmate comments that top spot on the ranking likely went to Hector, who waits anxiously for his score. A female student suggests that Lilia also stands a chance at leading the board due to her impressive display of firepower. Cutting short both of their expectations, Valerius points into the crowd and announces that 46th place belongs to Noah Raven, the black-hooded boy, causing Lilia and the other candidates to widen their eyes in complete shock. Hector grinds his teeth in rage, asking himself who on earth this mysterious boy who never stands out could possibly be. Surprised by the sudden attention, the hooded boy flees into the forest while the others scream in shock. Lilia explodes in fury, screaming how an ordinary boy living under a hood managed to rank higher than her, hiding behind a tree. Young Noah Raven holds his head in panic. Hating that he drew so much attention from his classmates, Lucius crosses his arms and simply watches Lilia's shouting from afar. As she remains furious over the ranking result, Valerius declares that the day's evaluations are finished, commanding everyone to accept their respective ranks without complaint. On the leaderboard, Lilia now holds rank 57, furious over Noah's rise, while her roommate lands at rank 102. Hector claims rank 47 and tells a classmate to shut her mouth when she kindly asks if his legs are fine. The top of the newcomer group is led by Lucius in 45th place, closely followed by Noah in 46th. The remaining students talk about their grades rising or falling, while Lilia continues fuming in the background. Valerius requests everyone's attention, announcing he will begin explaining how the academic routine will function starting tomorrow. He reveals that, starting tomorrow, all students will be divided and organized into 4-member teams. The tutor explains that the group will be their basic unit of survival, whether attending classes or executing field missions. He adds that naturally, the stronger the team, the more dangerous and difficult the assigned missions will be. The professor warns that scores remain individual, meaning that even squad allies are direct rivals. Some students find the rule overly strict, whispering worry about having to treat their own squad mates as rivals. He concludes by warning that official team divisions and everyone's first mandatory mission will be revealed tomorrow. However, he makes an exception and announces that the top 4 students from the newcomer ranking will be grouped into a single team. Lilia explodes in rage upon realizing the outcome, screaming in discontent over having to team up with her biggest class rivals. Lilia aggressively points her finger, warning them not to get in her way, while the others observe the union of the top students from afar. Valerius concludes his announcement, commanding everyone to prepare. While Lilia takes the chance to mock Hector's defeat in rock, paper, scissors, Lucius watches the whole commotion from the side with an analytical gaze, assessing his new teammates' strengths and weaknesses. The blonde boy walks in silence, knowing that because they form the strongest group, they will certainly receive the most dangerous missions of all. He thinks to himself that, while dealing with so many difficult personalities is a hassle, this challenge will be useful for making him even stronger. Valerius interrupts the group's departure, announcing that because they are the best, the top prospect's first field mission has already been set by him. The professor wears a provocative expression, revealing that tomorrow's test will be a very specific practical combat exercise. The four young prodigies lock tense gazes onto their master, anxiously awaiting the guidelines for the new challenge. Valerius stares at the group with a challenging gaze, commanding that their sole objective tomorrow will be to land a single strike on him. The next day, Hector and Lilia consider the challenge far too easy, commenting angrily that the instructor is underestimating their strength. Hector takes the initiative to charge first, promising to show his teammates how to defeat an opponent with a single swift attack. The master cracks an intriguing smile, coldly warning the young students not to start getting the wrong ideas about the exam. At that exact moment, a massive, overwhelming blaze of blue fire erupts from Valerius's body, terrifying the prodigies in the clearing. The instructor warns that even as the best of the newcomer class, not a single one of them possesses the ability to face him alone. With his sharp nails extended, he commands the group to charge together, demanding that all four attack in a coordinated fashion. The trio of prodigies grinds their teeth before the intimidating display of magical power, feeling the immense pressure of the blue fire. Lucius is the only one who maintains a completely serene composure, observing the massive torrent of mana without showing any fear. The fiery barrier of blue energy rises like an impenetrable wall around the powerful Imperial instructor's body. Proudly, Hector and Lilia disdain fighting as a team, and the redhead warns that she will deliver the first blow without anyone's help. Lucius locks his gaze onto Valerius, remembering that his opponent is a qualified elite evaluator sent by the Empire. The blonde recognizes that his opponent is one of the realm's most dangerous military forces, with very few people capable of defeating him. A challenging smile appears on Lucius's face, while Valerius awaits the start of combat with his sharp nails at the ready, defying individual orders. The four prodigies charge at high speed against the tutor from different directions. Lucius smiles excitedly at the impending clash, thinking to himself that this duel will be the perfect chance to test his own limits. The group coordinates an impressive wide-area assault. Attempting to corner the professor from every possible angle on the field, Hector initiates the attack, delivering a rapid slash with his blade, but Valerius easily blocks the steel using only his nails. The impact of the block generates a sharp clanging sound, and Hector's sword force is completely deflected without causing any damage. The swordsman is left bewildered by his opponent's absurd physical resilience. As he merely smirks with disdain at his attempt to slice him, Lilia capitalizes on the opening to descend from the sky, wrapped in a devastating hurricane of fire aimed right at Valerius's head. She concentrates all her flame magic into her right fist, determined to break through the experienced instructor's guard. With eyes glowing completely white from magical exertion, the girl delivers the fiery punch with all her physical power. The devastating impact of the punch unleashes an explosion of yellow flames that shakes the ground and kicks up a massive curtain of smoke. However, the smoke clears to reveal that Valerius caught the fiery punch with the palm of his left hand. Without suffering any burns, Noah emerges as a surprise from behind, conjuring purple magic binding circles to try and lock down the tutor's movement. Noah activates his purple magic circle right beneath Valerius's feet to attempt to immobilize him once and for all. With outstretched hands, Noah concentrates all his energy to keep the binding spell active. Suddenly, several spheres of light materialize in the air, forcing Lilia and Hector to back away rapidly. The magical projectiles fly across the clearing. While Hector tries to dodge that barrage of attacks, Hector repels the attacks with his sword, getting annoyed and thinking that this magic is only getting in the way. Lilia charges forward with her flaming fists, screaming at Hector to get out of the way so she can attack. Hector is confused as he feels Lilia resting her hand directly on his head to gain leverage. Hector yells at her not to jump out of nowhere, calling her a nuisance for doing that. Noah screams in panic, asking if Lilia is trying to get herself gone by advancing in such a reckless manner. While Noah keeps shouting in concern, Valerius simply watches the entire situation in silence. Valerius fixes his attention on the group with an intimidating glare that showcases his total superiority. Lucius finally begins to move, starting to gather his own glowing blue mana into his hands. With eyes glowing intensely, he prepares a powerful spell while locking onto the target ahead. Hector and Lilia hold firm, preparing to coordinate their next push against the instructor. Lucius fires a powerful beam of blue electricity that streaks straight toward Valerius. Valerius is enveloped in blue lightning, but appears completely unbothered by the force of the attack. A massive explosion of purple and blue energy occurs, forcing the youths to shield themselves from the impact. Hector and the others try to recover amid the dust while observing the strike's result. Lucius lands softly on the ground as the smoke begins to settle over the training field. Lucius watches the dust settle while hearing the instructor begin to speak in a calm manner. Valerius remarks that he would appreciate it if they took better care of the academy's facilities. A massive circular crater has formed around Valerius, demonstrating the destruction caused by the fight. Valerius smirks, while Lucius flashes a wild, excited gaze at how the battle is unfolding. Lilia screams that it's not over yet, while Hector charges forward, promising to slice the instructor on his next attack. Lucius continues watching everything attentively, analyzing every single movement made by his teammates. Hector and Lilia attack together at high speed, but Valerius dodges every charge effortlessly with a single hand motion. Valerius unleashes a shockwave that knocks Lilia and Hector backward. Lucius widens his eyes as he realizes something surprising about Valerius's fighting style. The three are violently thrown through the air, while Lucius remains standing in the same spot. Analyzing, Lucius locks his gaze onto Valerius and begins to understand the true secret behind that man. He notes that while it appears Valerius is fighting all three at the same time, that isn't actually what is happening. In reality, he handles them one at a time at absurd speed, defeating the first, the second, and the third. The more he transitions between targets, the wider. A tiny, random opening opens up directly behind him. Realizing this, Lucius begins formulating a strategy to strike that exact blind spot. He decides to predict where that opening will appear by syncing his action with the exact timing of their attacks. Lilia recovers quickly and plants her fist on the ground, ready to jump back into combat without hesitation. Lilia groans in pain, but angrily yells at Valerius not to dare underestimate her strength. Valerius merely lets out a taunting whisper upon seeing the young student's persistence. Lilia and Hector charge forward once again with full force, while Lucius prepares himself right behind them. Lucius capitalizes on the moment of his teammates' charge to initiate his own rapid sprint. He dashes past Noah, who is still catching his breath on the ground, startling him with his speed. Valerius remains focused on repelling Hector and Lilia's coordinated strikes without breaking rhythm. With extremely precise movements, he dodges Hector's blade and Lilia's flaming punch. From atop a tree branch, Lucius carefully monitors the exchange of blows to pinpoint the perfect moment. The two give it their all to force the instructor to move and create the opening Lucius desperately needs. Valerius blocks the attacks easily, warning them that such tactics won't work on him. Suddenly, Noah, Lilia, and Hector feel an intense pressure that completely paralyzes their bodies. At that exact instant, Lucius comes diving from the sky wrapped in his powerful, brilliant blue electricity. With a confident smile, Lucius realizes his attack has finally pierced through the instructor's guard. A colossal electrical discharge strikes Valerius dead center on his back, illuminating the entire battlefield. Lucius's concentrated attack generates an intense flash right at the point of impact with his opponent. Hector and Lilia shield their eyes from the bright radiance spreading across the entire area. The massive explosion of mana echoes through the area, creating a huge shockwave across the field. Lucius maintains a completely calm expression as he watches the smoke and wind clear. Everyone is left in shock upon seeing that Valerius is completely unscathed inside his spherical barrier. Lilia mutters in disbelief that she can't comprehend the absurd durability of the tutor's defense. Noah thinks to himself that even with such a powerful strike, they were unable to leave so much as a scratch on him. Valerius sarcastically praises the group for managing to force him to use real magic. Lucius simply watches as the instructor begins dispelling the barrier while a breeze blows across the clearing. Valerius mockingly remarks that he seems to have expected too much from all their abilities. He warns that if they fail within 1 hour, the group will be disbanded and everyone will be demoted in class. Hector and Lilia react with intense anger and frustration at the severe threat of demotion. The instructor commands them to think carefully about how to act as a team, warning that he will no longer pull his punches. He advises the group to devise a better strategy than simply waiting around for an opening. Lucius listens to the advice attentively. Keeping his mind focused on finding a viable solution, Lilia begins throwing a fit out of sheer anger, shouting and asking if the instructor is even human. Shortly after, she bites her lips in silence, attempting to control her rage and frustration. Lilia abruptly turns to Lucius and yells, impatiently calling for his attention. She asks him directly if he happens to have come up with any plan for them to win. Lucius gazes back at her with total tranquility, maintaining a serene, controlled tone of voice. She admits that he was the only one to make him use defensive magic and says she will listen to him this time. She clenches her fist tightly, trying to swallow her massive pride in order to cooperate. The redhead firmly states that she refuses to lose in a place like this. Hector also approaches and begins speaking about what he noticed during the previous clash. All the teammates gather around Lucius to hear what he has to propose for the fight. Lucius reveals that he noticed a faint distortion in the magical barrier when his lightning spell hit it. Hector is surprised, asking if it was truly possible to spot a distortion at that moment. Lucius thoroughly explains his conclusions regarding the mechanics of that protective barrier. He deduces that the spell concentrates all spiritual energy precisely at the point of impact. That means striking multiple points simultaneously will disperse the energy, weakening the defense. Noah is blown away. Realizing that Lucius cracked the magic secret in a fraction of a second, Lilia reignites her flames with an excited smile, fully grasping the attack plan. She concludes that the more simultaneous attacks they can deliver, the better the result will be. Lucius confirms directly, calmly asking if she is capable of performing that task. Hector smirks challenge-wise, warning Lucius not to think he is doing this to help him. Noah enthusiastically volunteers, stating that if they need volume, they can leave it to him. In the distance, Valerius patiently awaits the next move from the four young mages. He cracks an intrigued smile, saying he wants to see what they have prepared to face him. The three set off on a coordinated charge with complete determination to execute the strategy. The group attacks Valerius's barrier from all directions to overload his defense. Noah uses his binding and summoning magic to drastically increase the number of targets. Valerius notices the attempt to smother him in numbers but dismisses it, stating that alone won't suffice. Hector approaches with an intensely focused gaze, channeling all his power into his sword. He delivers a devastating downward sword slash, hitting the barrier with full force. The blade's impact against the defensive barrier generates a massive boom of pure energy. Hector shouts Lilia's name loudly to signal the exact moment she should strike. Lilia emerges right after amid a storm of devastating flames, hurtling toward the target. Her blazing fist strikes the barrier at the exact same instant, adding her force to the joint attack. The combined force of Lilia and Hector's strikes places immense pressure on Valerius's spherical defense. Under the heavy pressure of the simultaneous attacks, small cracks begin appearing on the barrier. Valerius praises the blow, calling it their best attempt, but warns that it's still not enough. He gathers a massive amount of concentrated magical energy in his hands, cynically expressing regret. Lilia and Hector used so much mana that they end up completely exhausted, lacking the strength to continue. Noah and the other teammates begin faltering physically and magically due to the extreme exertion. At this critical moment, Lucius places his hand over Hector and Lilia's hands on the sword's hilt. With a confident, determined look, he calmly states that their fight isn't over yet. A massive wave of glowing magical energy erupts from the point where the three grip the weapon. Hector and Lilia shout with all their might as they feel that sudden wave of energy surge through them. Uniting their remaining strength, the three push the sword downward with all the power they possess. Yellow magical energy flows down the blade under the tense, determined gazes of their allies. Valerius widens his eyes in utter shock as he sees the powerful beam of energy pierce the sky. The strike's force completely shatters the defensive barrier, unleashing a devastating burst of mana. As the dust begins to clear, the group anxiously watches to see if the plan actually worked. Hector and Lilia are panting and exhausted on the ground, barely able to stand after the effort. Noticing the bleeding cut on his cheek, Valerius smirks and announces that everyone passed the test. Lilia mutters in relief that they finally made it. While Hector wears a huge grin of victory, Noah begins thanking the heavens for their success, but ends up collapsing face first onto the ground from sheer exhaustion. Hector and Lilia also drop to their knees on the grass exhausted, while Lucius remains standing, lost in thought. Lilia tells Lucius to be grateful for her firepower, and Hector jokes that he wouldn't mind having him as a subordinate. Lilia gets annoyed by Hector's comment, but he coldly replies that he doesn't like repeating himself. Lucius ignores his teammates bickering in the background. Remaining focused on his own thoughts, he raises his hand and stares at his own fingers with an extremely serious, reflective expression. The blonde mentally questions the strange sensation he felt right at the moment of the fusion. He realized that his own magic merged with the sword, literally transforming into a combat blade. Lucius ponders this blend of swordsmanship and magic, thinking about the massive potential it could hold. A smile of ambition creeps onto his face as he considers the possibility of perfectly mastering this hybrid form. He remains deeply focused on this idea. Completely ignoring all the exhaustion around him, Valerius clearly repeats that all of them successfully passed the rigorous practical test. He explains that the true goal was to teach them to work as a team, praising their progress. The instructor advises them never to forget the perfect harmony they achieved on that final strike. Valerius begins disappearing into thin air wrapped in his blue flames. Leaving the young mages thoughtful in the clearing, Lucius still focuses on the peculiar feeling of swordsmanship, blending with magical energy. At that instant, he smiles confidently, knowing that mastering this technique will be the ultimate weapon against his greatest rival. Sometime later, the scene shifts to the vast, quiet interior of the Royal Academy's library. Lucius is seen sitting intently, carefully reading one of the massive books from the shelves. He studies a work focused on the basic fundamentals of spiritual energy theory and its circuits. The book explains that transmuted spiritual energy travels through the body's internal circuits. This energy then converts into mana for mages or combat aura used by swordsmen. Generally, it is believed that every human is born with only one of these circuit types in their body. He reflects that the previous attack combined his magic with Hector's physical power, but wonders if he can do it solo. The youth partially closes the book for a moment, immersed in deep deductions about this possibility. The text reveals that, on rare occasions, individuals are born with both circuits and manage to fuse both powers. Lucius displays a radiant, victorious smile, feeling absolute certainty that he has found the right path. At a later time, a sharp blade is swiftly drawn in an open area used for practical tests. He recalls that when he tried replicating the process alone later in the dark, things didn't go perfectly. The activation attempt ended in an initial failure, but that didn't discourage him, even failing. He felt a light vibration identical to the energy circuit he mastered in his past life. This indicates that the combat energy circuit he mastered in the past might still lie dormant inside him. If he can awaken it in this new life, he will possess the ability to reach the same legendary level as the founder elsewhere in the academy. A female silhouette gracefully leaps through the air surrounded by black crows. A super energetic new instructor named Kathy introduces herself using a megaphone to give directions. She excitedly announces the start of a special high-level match between the academy's different classes. A few senior students begin whispering upon noticing the newly arrived freshmen at the venue. Kathy encourages everyone to give their absolute best to climb the institution's official rankings. Lucius analyzes the environment, instantly realizing that those students hold far higher ranks. The older opponents glare at Lucius's group with arrogant chuckles of superiority. Lilia gets deeply annoyed and furiously screams at them not to dare stare at her like that. A student with a massive, intimidating physical build approaches the group from behind. Lilia keeps growling in rage, while Hector simply observes the situation, maintaining his composure. Suddenly, the massive student roughly bumps into Lilia's shoulder by accident. Lilia yells indignantly, but the boy apologizes, saying it's hard to see down there due to his height. Lilia is startled by the boy's height, while his companion apologizes for the bump. Kathy explains that the rules are simple, and that a spiritual orb sits inside the trunk of a giant tree. She reveals that the first team to lay hands on that orb will be declared the winner. Lucius listens to the explanation carefully, beginning to ponder the properties of that orb. Kathy details that the orb is a crystal of pure energy, capable of drastically boosting the power of whoever absorbs it. The other students excitedly comment that absorbing it is equivalent to skipping several years of grueling training. A sly smile appears on Lucius's face as he realizes the massive opportunity for growth laying before him. He realizes that this is the perfect chance he needed to achieve his goals at the academy. He plans to use that ultra-pure energy to finally awaken his dormant combat energy circuit. Meanwhile, opposing teams prepare, showing confident gazes hungry for combat. Lucius and his group also assume an extremely serious, focused stance for the start of the clash. Kathy fires a signal flare marking the official start of the match, sending everyone sprinting into the forest. The quartet advances at high speed through the dense vegetation, maintaining a coordinated formation. Lucius looks out of the corner of his eye, sensing opponents rapidly approaching from the side. Two senior rivals appear with arrogant smirks, ready to ambush the freshman group. They leap from above toward the group, shouting a sarcastic apology for picking on freshmen. Hector looks on with disdain, wondering if these guys are truly the ones holding higher ranks. The two attackers charge directly at Lucius, aggressively commanding him to go down in defeat. Without breaking a sweat, Lucius discharges a blast of blue lightning that blows both invaders away. The rivals fall knocked out on the ground, leaving Hector and Lilia completely baffled by such ease. Lucius calmly warns them not to be fooled by ranks and to remember their previous training. He looks at his teammates with determination, stating with absolute conviction that their group is strong. His words motivate Hector and Lilia, who assume an even more confident expression for the contest. A mysterious voice from behind intimidatingly asks who on earth they are calling strong. Another senior smirks, arrogantly warning that the real fight is about to start now. Hector turns in annoyance, asking with disdain what this supposed real fight is. The opponents announce that it's a freshman hunt to steal their rankings by force. One of the rivals begins concentrating dangerous, glowing green magical energy in his own hands. He fires a massive blast of green lightning straight toward where Hector is positioned. Hector reacts quickly with a drop of sweat on his face, preparing to handle the impending danger. With absolute precision, Hector delivers a swift, diagonal slash that deflects the entire green energy attack. The spellcaster is left bewildered upon seeing his strongest strike repelled with such ease. Hector takes a firm stance after the block, keeping his sharp gaze locked onto his opponent. Two twin brothers leap from above toward Lilia, shouting in annoyance for her not to get ahead of herself. The two attack in perfect sync, holding heavy weapons to crush the red-haired girl. Lilia glares at her attackers with extreme fury and determination, showing zero signs of hesitation. She ignites her fists with intense flames, preparing to repel the double attack with full force. The redhead awaits the exact moment of the opponent's descent to deliver her explosive fire strike. Lilia's flaming fist collides directly with the twin brothers' weapons in a massive explosion. Lilia grinds her teeth in rage, intimidatingly warning the opponents not to dare mess with her. The twin brothers are in complete shock, feeling the unbelievable raw force emanating from the girl. She concentrates even more flaming magical power into her right fist, preparing to finish them off. Lilia delivers a devastating punch, screaming for them never to dare underestimate the freshman group again. She watches the attackers blasted away by the explosive force of her flame's impact. In another corner, Noah emerges, conjuring a massive barrier of sharp ice crystals falling from the sky. The opponent screams in pain while Hector and the others advance relentlessly against the rest of the team. Noah thinks to himself that everything is fine. Remembering that Lucius used the word we when referring to the group's strength, he realizes that declaration of strength also includes his own potential as the team's mage. Noah's sharp ice crystals shatter the defenses and freeze the opponents. Movement, Hector capitalizes on the opening, charging in with a swift strike that knocks out the enemies once and for all. Lilia praises her classmates' fighting skill, while Hector can barely believe they managed to win. Lucius approaches calmly, asking in a serene tone if the confrontation is finally over. The three teammates stare at Lucius, still trying to catch their breath after the intense battle. Observing the numerous fallen opponents on the ground, Lucius simply says it's time for them to move on. Through her monitoring magic orb, Kathy watches in shock as the top 5 teams fall. She becomes even more intrigued upon noticing that those responsible for this feat were none other than the freshmen. The instructor admits that the strength displayed by Hector, Lilia, and Noah is truly impressive for newcomers. However, her main focus of curiosity turns entirely toward Lucius's mysterious figure. She reflects that he motivated the group with few words and possesses the power to defeat seniors on his own. With a look of deep fascination, Kathy mentally asks herself who that blonde boy truly is. Meanwhile, Lucius Elminster continues leading his team at high speed through the forest, atop a distant tree. A mysterious figure uses binoculars to monitor the group's steps. The binoculars reveal that the massive glowing tree holding the spiritual orb is being guarded by rivals. Lucius and his teammates finally reach the clearing where the great tree stands. Lilia celebrates, saying they made it, while Hector warns them to stay alert for enemies behind. The group gazes in awe at the massive, glowing tree housing the prize in the center of its canopy. The spiritual orb emits a magnificent glow right in the middle of the sacred tree's hollow. They charge with determination toward the prize, feeling that victory is drawing closer. However, Lucius suddenly changes his expression upon sensing an immense danger emerging unexpectedly. He abruptly extends his arms and shouts, firmly commanding everyone to halt immediately. Lilia complains, saying the others will get there first. But Lucius sharply demands that she just listen. Lilia goes quiet as she begins hearing a terrifying rumble that makes the entire ground around them shake. The massive tree begins moving violently, revealing that something is terribly wrong with the scenery. Hector also backs away, startled by the overwhelming noise echoing through the entire dense forest. Noah quickly gets into his stance, preparing his mana for whatever threat emerges from there. A colossal, monstrous creature begins emerging directly beneath the glowing tree. A beast of gigantic proportions reveals itself completely before all the terrified students. The other student teams panic completely, beginning to flee the area frantically. Lucius and his group stand firm, facing the emergence of the terrifying, unexpected opponent. One of the examiners runs frantically toward Kathy, shouting for her attention. He demands the exam be canceled immediately so they can call for reinforcements urgently. Kathy merely lets out an unbothered murmur while stretching in a completely calm manner. She denies the request and decides to continue the exam, making the examiner ask if she has lost her mind. She walks calmly, arguing that small, unexpected situations like this happen all the time. The man finds it a total absurdity, but the instructor continues her logic in a cold manner. The other examiners around sweat nervously before Kathy's ruthless, strict attitude. She coldly asserts that anyone who perishes here wouldn't survive a real battlefield anyway. Even understanding the cruel logic, the men still display immense concern for the students' safety. Kathy suddenly shifts her tone of voice, giggling and playfully saying she was just joking. Kathy assures the other examiners that if the situation gets out of hand, she will handle everything herself. The men let out a sigh of relief, knowing they can trust their colleague's immense power. Even so, she finds it strange, as no magical beast should be inhabiting that area. Kathy narrows her eyes, mentally concluding that something is definitely very wrong. In the marsh, combat against the colossal creature proceeds while multiple teams try attacking it together. A senior swordsman leaps, wielding his blade wrapped in lightning to deliver a clean slash. The strike hits the monster's scales dead center, but ends up failing to produce the expected destructive effect. He realizes in horror that the beast's scales are being empowered by the orb's own energy. Other students unleash support spells and coordinated physical attacks, but everything seems useless. The charges produce only a cloud of smoke against the giant monster's impenetrable hide. The students panic upon seeing the creature remain completely unscathed after the barrage. The giant creature emerges further from the marsh waters, locking its glowing red eyes onto them. One of the young men screams in total despair upon realizing they couldn't land a single scratch. The creature's thrashing creates massive water waves while the students scream, unsure how to act before it. The monster takes a colossal leap entirely out of the water, hovering threateningly over the group. It opens its jaws packed with sharp teeth to swallow them, sparking uncontrolled cries of flight. While everyone runs terrified, Lucius fearlessly leaps toward the giant beast's open maw. The others scream in shock, asking what he thinks he's doing and if he's lost his mind. The blonde appears tiny before the creature's gaping throat, but doesn't hesitate for a single second. Lilia despairs, screaming and calling Lucius a complete idiot for putting himself in such unnecessary danger. Hector and Lilia watch helplessly as Lucius is swallowed by the beast with a small glow in his hands. Inside the monster's mouth, he wears a calm, confident smile while preparing his final strike. The colossal beast crashes back into the water with a violent boom. After swallowing the young freshmen, Lilia and Hector watch the scene completely frozen, unable to process what just happened. A massive torrent of water is thrown high into the air as soon as the monster's body sinks back into the lake. One of the seniors grumbles in annoyance that the freshman is a useless fool and that he hates inexperienced fighters. Suddenly, an extremely strong, blinding flash of light begins emanating from inside the creature itself. One of the surviving students stammers in fright, frantically pointing at the water, telling everyone to look. The monster is blasted into the air again by a colossal energy explosion coming from within it. The students realize frantically that the giant monster's crash will trigger a tsunami that will swallow everything. However, the gigantic beast's body is completely pulverized from the inside out by a brilliant flash. The massive energy discharge illuminates the entire night sky, disintegrating the threat without leaving a trace. Hector and Lilia watch the shower of light particles falling over them, completely speechless. The other students in the clearing remain motionless, unable to comprehend such a display of power. Lucius gracefully floats down from the sky under the moonlight, looking like an untouched deity. One of the seniors whispers in awe, realizing the freshman destroyed the monster on his own from the inside Lucius lands, displaying a victorious smile while holding the glowing green spiritual orb in his hands. He gazes at his prize with satisfaction, muttering to himself that he finally secured the item. His boots touch the ground softly under the gaze of all the other waiting participants. Hector and Lilia stare at him with a mix of immense relief, deep shock, and a bit of irritation. Lucius maintains his enigmatic smile, while the orb in his hands continues emanating strong energy. Kathy appears hovering in the air, cheerfully announcing through her megaphone that the exercise is officially over. Lucius glances up, watching the instructor declare the match closed in the clearing. She casually commands all students to begin returning to the facilities. Kathy's golden eyes gleam with dark, amused interest as she observes the boy's potential. The freshman quartet gathers again around Lucius, who still holds the glowing green crystal. One of the seniors walks away in discontent, grumbling that he can't believe they were outdone by mere freshmen. The four friends begin walking back together, led by Lucius, who illuminates the path with the orb. Hector boasts that it was far too easy, while Lilia comments that she would have preferred facing someone stronger. Noah merely lets out a subtle chuckle behind his hood upon hearing his classmates' banter. Lilia decides to ignore the moment and tries to change the subject no matter what. Suddenly, Hector cuts off the conversation upon noticing that Lucius is beginning to glow. Lilia watches her classmate, wondering who he truly is behind so much mystery. Lucius ignores the stares around him, focusing all his attention on the glowing green orb. He analyzes the object up close, realizing he finally possesses a real spiritual energy orb. The boy senses zero doubt that the spiritual energy concentrated inside it is incredibly dense. He reflects that this power might be enough to awaken his combat spirit circuit. Suddenly, a mysterious noise coming from the bushes catches the young group's attention. A man emerges from the forest, praising the impressive strength the freshmen displayed. He says they were so terrified they couldn't even move, and Lilia recognizes the man who bumped into them earlier that morning. The stranger says he was deeply impressed. Barely able to believe they were only first years, Lucius remains silent, merely glancing sideways to observe Noah's reaction. The senior continues praising the group, saying he became a fan after seeing such incredible spiritual energy. He holds out his hand, saying that despite being weak, they've been there a long time and wants them to be friends so they can help them. Lilia gazes at the senior's outstretched hand for a few moments, showing suspicion. Lilia smiles cockily, accepting the boy's offer of friendship in a friendly manner. The moment the two extend their hands to seal the deal, the atmosphere changes completely. The senior cracks an extremely malicious smirk, revealing his true intentions. He attacks Lilia by surprise with a violent, cowardly blow, catching the girl completely off guard. Lilia goes into shock, coughing up blood as she feels the devastating impact of the treacherous strike. The senior's strike causes a loud explosion, violently throwing the girl far away. Hector and Noah watch the horrific scene completely frozen in shock from the sudden attack. Lilia falls to the ground completely unconscious and severely injured from the assault. Hector screams furiously, demanding to know what that lowlife thinks he's doing. Lucius catches Lilia in his arms, coldly warning that the exercise is already over. The attacker finds the situation funny, saying that all of this is simply magnificent. He glares at the freshmen with a psychopathic look, repeating that they are truly magnificent. He sadistically asserts that the youths are the best prey they could ever ask for. Hector immediately draws his sword, overcome by overwhelming rage against the cowards. The senior smirks with disdain, asking if the boys have ever heard of the mired. Several other senior students surround the freshman group with dark gazes in the middle of the forest. Noah whispers confusedly beneath his hood, trying to understand what that term means. The attacker explains that the academy's only rule is that the 125 worst students are expelled annually. He says they never managed to rank up to receive a blessing, but also never fell among the worst to be expelled. He reveals that students who simply age while trapped at the academy year after year suffer from this terrible cycle. The man assumes a macabre expression, revealing that people like them are known here as the mired. Lucius keeps his composure, asking what these washed-up seniors are planning to do with them. The leader of the mired laments that they spent far too much time here and aged without passing the middle ranks. He vents bitterly that they lost even the right to carry their own family names. Hector mocks them, saying they're nothing more than old failures clinging to this place out of pure cowardice. The man screams in despair that they lost everything and that few options remain for washed-up old-timers to turn things around. He furiously declares that they won't stop until they secure a blessing and reclaim everything they lost. A giant magical hourglass glowing purple appears behind the seniors while they scream that nothing will stop them. Hector observes the strange structure in horror, wondering if that thing is made of remains. Multiple skulls float inside the hourglass's purple liquid, making Noah's eyes glow with hatred. Noah unleashes a massive magic circle on the ground, conjuring dense, powerful dark magic. A torrent of dark flames erupts around Noah, surprising the enemies watching from afar. One of the chubby accomplices smirks mockingly at the freshman's attempt at retaliation. The seniors use the giant hourglass's energy to attempt to contain and absorb Noah's magical attack. Hector watches the tense clash with concern. While Noah prepares to fight the enemies, the two attackers raise their arms to channel and absorb the dark magic cast by Noah. All the dark energy is quickly siphoned and gathered in the seniors' palms. The giant glass jar begins boiling, glowing with an intense purple light full of souls. They begin laughing hysterically in ecstasy upon feeling the massive flux of power entering the artifact. The chubby guy says with a sadistic smile that he will continue draining their energy until they pass. Away, Noah screams desperately for them to stay back, but cannot stop the drain. The senior keeps laughing while siphoning the freshman's vital force without mercy. Seeing Noah's dire situation, Hector sprints at high speed to try and shatter the jar. The artifact glows even brighter as more magical energy is drained and gathered inside it. Hector realizes the danger, locking his full attention onto that cursed jar. He leaps into the air with all his strength. Delivering a sword slash directly against the object, Hector strikes with determination, believing that destroying the jar will end his friend's suffering. However, the blade passes right through the artifact without causing any physical damage, leaving Hector stunned. Hector is completely incredulous upon seeing his physical attack pass right through the object. The chubby attacker suddenly appears, grabbing Hector by the neck with extreme ease. He warns that only the person who activated the jar can touch it, while starting to drain Hector's energy. Hector falls to the ground completely weakened, lacking the strength to keep fighting alongside Noah. Lucius observes his ally's quick defeat with a cold, calculating gaze. The seniors laughingly explain that the jar easily absorbs any type of magical attack. They add that the artifact also drains energy from anyone who attempts to touch them. Upon hearing this, Lucius takes a step forward, stating that in that case, their strategy is simple to bypass. The boy dashes like lightning and leaps toward the chubby attacker. Lucius lands an extremely violent kick right in the center of his opponent's face. The colossal impact force sends the chubby senior flying across the clearing. Hector watches the scene from the ground, shocked by the overwhelming physical power his classmate displayed. Lucius smirks mockingly, commenting that real physical attacks seem to work just fine. The attacker crashes onto the ground, kicking up dust, leaving the leader of the Mired completely baffled. Lucius walks calmly toward the fallen enemies, passing close to Hector's sword. Hector stares at him with difficulty, still very weak from having his energy drained by the artifact. He asks what Lucius intends to do, reminding him that the boy is a mage and not a physical warrior. Lucius simply shakes his head while bending down to pick up the sword from the ground. He wields Hector's blade. Analyzing the weapon's weight in his hands, he reveals that, in truth, his original training in the past was quite different. The enemy stands up, wiping blood from his face, furious at the humiliation he just endured. Lucius takes a flawless swordsmanship stance, revealing that he originally trained as a swordsman. A glimpse of his past life as the feared Zeno flashes in his mind with a sinister smile. The boy focuses his stance while the wind around him in the forest blows hard. With eyes glowing intensely, Lucius displays a confident, challenging smile toward his opponents. The seniors find the situation funny, mocking the sight of a mage holding a physical sword. The chubby guy mockingly asks if the little mage now wants to play swordsman. He charges forward furiously, screaming that he will snap that amateur sword in half with a single blow. In the blink of an eye, Lucius moves with absurd speed, delivering lightning-fast slashes of blue electrical arcs. The senior screams in pain as he is mercilessly sliced by the blonde boy's precise attacks. The leader tries to block the strikes with his own blade, but panics upon feeling the crushing pressure. Lucius maintains a cold, relentless gaze, dominating the fight effortlessly. With a swift technical movement, he bypasses the opponent's defense with total ease. Lucius spins his body flawlessly to deliver the finishing blow to his adversary. A massive diagonal slash strikes the leader of the Mired, instantly defeating him with great power. The man collapses unconscious onto the ground beside his partner, leaving Lucius victorious on the field. Lilia watches all of that from afar, muttering in complete shock that this can't be real. Lucius glances sideways with a completely calm, indifferent expression. The leader of the Mired slumps passed out on the ground, while the boy remains still, holding the sword. Hector watches everything from the ground, thinking it's impossible for someone to perform a technique like that without mana or combat spirit. He gazes at Lucius in total shock, asking himself how the boy could possess such an absurd skill level. Lucius leaps quickly toward the final attacker, who screams in fright upon seeing the boy approach. The man panics, begging the boy to calm down, admitting he thought he was just some ordinary mage. However, he realizes Lucius isn't using combat spirit and is still just a helpless 12-year-old child. The attacker tries to calm down, flashing a wicked smile as he realizes he holds the physical advantage against the boy. He touches the large magical hourglass to absorb energy under Lucius's cold, attentive gaze. The man undergoes a bizarre transformation, his muscles swelling in size, making the boy tremble with fear. A massive purple aura erupts around him, and he arrogantly asks what the freshman thought of his new power. Lucius strikes with his sword, but the blade bounces off the enemy's muscular chest, repelled without leaving a scratch. The brute laughs mockingly, asserting that no sword wielded by a child without spiritual energy can harm his body. He laughs loudly, saying that this is the power of all the spiritual energy they stole from other students. The man commands the boy to prepare and charges full force toward him, while Lucius moves to dodge. They exchange rapid blows, and the enemy manages to block Lucius's blade using only his hardened arms. He throws a violent punch right near the boy's face, who manages to dodge at the last second with agility. The man keeps attacking relentlessly with brutal strikes, forcing Lucius to defend himself as best he can. Lucius realizes the situation isn't good, feeling the intense pressure of his opponent's physical strikes. The brute tries to land another devastating punch, but the young swordsman quickly leaps backward. Lucius uses his sword to parry the consecutive attacks, but feels the heavy impact of every single charge. He analyzes the situation, realizing his current attacks lack sufficient power to break through that defense. The two continue an intense combat, with blades and fists colliding, creating blue sparks. Lucius reflects that in his former body, an opponent with a defense like that would be sliced as easily as paper. He blocks another heavy strike from the enemy, feeling the massive difference in physical strength between the two bodies. The brute begins losing patience. Angrily shouting that he's sick of playing around with the boy, he roars furiously, saying the freshman is truly testing his patience and prepares a definitive attack. Lucius is blasted backward by the impact, sliding across the clearing floor under his friend's worried gazes. Lilia holds Noah in her arms, screaming in despair as she sees her classmate thrown far away by the enemy. Lucius stands up calmly and dusts himself off, maintaining a firm stance before his adversary. The man laughs, admitting that the boy's swordsmanship caught him off guard at the start of combat. He mocks him, saying that without combat spirit, Lucius's swordsmanship is nothing more than a harmless baby attack. Lucius decides to drop the sword, placing the glowing spiritual energy orb on the ground in front of him. Suddenly, he feels a strong thumping in his chest. Sensing a very familiar feeling emerging from within, Lucius realizes that the combat spirit circuit from his past life is finally responding to the orb's energy. The boy extends his hand toward the glowing green crystal, knowing exactly what he needs to do now. The brute charges with his purple aura active, shouting that it's time to end the freshman's life once and for all. Lucius focuses on the green glow, remembering perfectly how to channel that spiritual power. He grips the magic orb tightly, releasing a massive amount of green energy that begins to overflow. A colossal amount of spiritual power erupts from the object, completely wrapping around the boy's body. The clearing is illuminated by an intense green flash, while the energy spins violently around Lucius. The massive flux of power is absorbed directly through the boy's chest and back in an impressive manner. Lucius closes his eyes and relaxes his body, feeling all that spiritual strength penetrate his soul. He absorbs every single fragment of energy from the orb, completing the fusion process with the hidden power. The green light integrates completely into Lucius's body in a massive explosion of glowing particles. When he opens his eyes, his pupils glow in a frightening, rage-filled orange hue. The boy cracks a dark smile upon realizing he has finally managed to awaken his old power. The massive silhouette of his past life as the legendary Zeno emerges behind him like a projection of pure energy. The brute stops his attack instantly, starting to sweat in terror as he feels the boy's terrifying aura. Lucius feels his legs firm, reflecting that he forced the opening of his spiritual circuit using that orb's power. Lucius grips the sword hilt firmly, knowing his combat spirit will likely last for only a single strike. The brute senses a drastic shift in the air, backing away terrified, unable to comprehend what is happening. A giant, overwhelming red aura erupts around Lucius, leaving his opponent petrified under such pressure. The man freezes completely in fear, sweat pouring down his face before the boy's crushing power. Lucius displays a deeply dark gaze, warning that ending a fight with a single strike is his specialty. The opponent exclaims in confusion upon realizing the absurd speed with which the freshman prepares his attack. The brute falls into complete despair, screaming to himself that he can't get hit by that attack under any circumstances. He tries to run frantically away, but Lucius's speed is infinitely superior to as Lucius executes a devastating diagonal slash, unleashing a blast of red energy that rips through everything in its path. The brutal strike causes a massive explosion, instantly defeating the final attacker under Lilia and Noah's intent gazes. The young swordsman remains silent as the smoke clears and his red aura begins to fade away. Lucius drops to his knees, exhausted, realizing that single strike truly was his limit with the energy drained from the orb. He breathes with great difficulty, feeling that all the spiritual energy he had absorbed is rapidly depleting. Even weakened, he mentally celebrates upon realizing he managed to force open his combat spirit circuit. The boy reflects that the process is still incomplete and that he won't be able to use this power again without another spiritual orb. Despite temporary limitations, a smile of immense satisfaction begins creeping onto Lucius's face. He sheathes the sword, thinking with determination that he now finally has a clear path forward to evolve. Noah runs worryingly toward his classmate, calling out to check if he is fine after the extreme effort Lilia approaches right after. Staring at the young freshman with a gaze mixed with admiration and deep bewilderment, she asks in a trembling voice what on earth that was that she just witnessed, still unable to believe what she saw. Hector watches the scene from afar in silence. While a strong wind blows leaves under the full moon in the sky, Noah asks if his friend is injured, and Lucius calmly replies that he is feeling perfectly fine. Hector slowly walks toward them, calling out to Lucius in a serious, deeply thoughtful manner. Lucius and Noah turn to pay attention to the young man, who displays a great inner unrest. Hector asserts that the way Lucius handles a sword is far too skilled, requiring decades of intense sword training. With a serious, suspicious look, the young noble demands to know who the master was that taught such fantastic swordsmanship to a mage. The two rivals stare fixedly at each other under the moonlight, creating a tense atmosphere among the freshmen in the forest. Lucius decides to ignore the question, maintaining his silence, leaving Hector even more intrigued and annoyed. The blonde merely cracks a subtle, mysterious smile, giving zero hints regarding his true origins. The next day, the group walks through the academy corridors, and Lilia cheerfully comments that their rank jumped significantly. Noah agrees, and she adds that all of them finally managed to obtain their coveted spiritual energy orbs. Now in 26th position, Lilia teases Noah, saying that from now on she won't lose to him in anything. Noah, holding 29th place, calmly replies that he will let her savor this victory for now. Hector walks right behind them in absolute silence, holding 25th place on the Royal Academy ranking. He wears a deeply annoyed expression on his face, clearly bothered by the events of the previous night. Lilia keeps joking and poking her classmates, while Lucius leads the freshman group down the hallway. Holding 19th place, Lucius recalls the exercise, reflecting that he managed to open his combat spirit circuit. He thinks that with his current spiritual energy reserves, he still cannot activate the circuit on his own and needs something more. Lucius concludes that his next objective must be securing a massive boost in his spiritual energy reserves. Suddenly, the youths come across a crowd of students gathered and whispering before a large announcement board. The poster on the board announces the staging of the region's 27th Grand Imperial Combat Betting Tournament. Lilia observes the announcement with bewilderment and curiosity, wondering what that flashy event could be. Lucius reads the poster out loud, intrigued by the mention of the Imperial Betting Tournament he just discovered. Suddenly, a hand drops from above, gently touching Lucius's head. Casually confirming the information, instructor Kathy hangs upside down from the ceiling, cheerfully asking if the young man is interested in the tournament. She praises the freshmen's performance from the previous night, thanking them for helping get rid of those annoying seniors. Lucius stares at her quite coldly, asking if that was all she wanted to discuss with the freshman group. Kathy does a flawless mid-air flip and lands on the ground, casually commenting that she knows they are curious about the poster. She explains that the event is a combat tournament sponsored by the Empire, where the region's strongest fighters gather. Other students whisper suspiciously, commenting that the tournament is nothing more than a show for wealthy nobles to bet money on fighters. One of the freshmen anxiously whispers, if that isn't the tournament where people perish every single time. Kathy floats in the air calmly, confirming with total naturalness that this rumor is practically true. However, she lands beside him with a mischievous smile, warning that there is a major benefit behind all that risk. Kathy explains that the tournament arena features a special structure that collects all the spiritual energy released by the fighters. She reveals that whoever is inside the arena ends up naturally absorbing all that accumulated energy throughout the fights. Because of this, as the fights progress, the concentration of spiritual energy on the arena floor rises higher and higher. She adds that the longer a warrior remains in the arena, the greater the increase in their base energy reserves will be. Lucius listens to the explanation with wide eyes, while Lilia watches her classmate, unable to understand his reaction. Kathy adds that because it's an off-campus event, it doesn't affect their rankings, making it great for anyone just looking to test their strength. Hector decides to leave, saying there's no reason to participate, and Lilia agrees. Fearing her parents' reaction if they find out about gambling, Lucius reflects intriguingly on the energy-accumulating arena, ignoring Lilia, who complains that participating in that is extremely shady. He realizes that if he wins every match, he will finally be able to secure a massive amount of spiritual power for himself. The blonde boy calls out to Kathy, who is already starting to float away from the student group. The instructor turns in surprise upon hearing the call from the young freshman she was speaking with earlier. Lucius asks where he should submit his registration form, leaving Lilia shocked that he wants to enter an unranked event. Kathy opens her arms cheerfully, saying she will personally make sure to send in his registration if he truly wants to participate. She steps closer, and Lilia gets quite annoyed upon hearing the instructor address her classmate by the affectionate nickname Lucy. Kathy mysteriously whispers that 3 high-ranking students from the academy also plan to join the competition. She bids farewell, floating away with a big smile, wishing the boy good luck, leaving Lilia deeply indignant behind Lucius. Lucius displays a subtle, highly confident smile, knowing that this is the perfect opportunity he needed so badly. The scene shifts to the massive packed arena where the announcer welcomes the audience to the Grand Imperial Betting Tournament. He explains that the rules are simple. Just bet on your favorite fighter to receive a great payout if they win. The announcer reveals that betting early in the competition offers the best chance at a massive, valuable jackpot. He excitedly shouts into his microphone that bettors who invest early are the real winners of this combat tournament. In the audience, some wealthy nobles whisper dismissively about Lucius, commenting that a 12-year-old freshman isn't worth a single dime. Lucius walks imposingly into the arena hall, observing the glowing displays featuring portraits of the competitors fighting for the prize. He reflects that, as expected of an imperial tournament, every warrior there radiates an extraordinary amount of spiritual energy. The boy walks calmly, observing the vivid colored aura wrapping around each experienced fighter present. He notes that the 3 strongest academy competitors Kathy mentioned seem to have not arrived at the combat arena yet. The announcer gestures enthusiastically to the crowd, announcing he will reveal the first-round matchup of the night. The big screens display the first matchup, pairing the terrifying, muscular Garzas against the young freshman Lucius Elminster. The announcer points out the brutal gap in physical size between the two, officially introducing Lucius's name to the crowd next. He introduces the freshman's opponent, revealing that Garzas is the feared representative of the Northern Escort Corps in the crowd. Lilia anxiously tells her classmates that the Northern Escort Corps is one of the Empire's strongest and most prestigious. Hector dismissively replies that she is quite informed about these imperial matters, and she simply nods in agreement. Other aristocrats laugh celebratory, believing that betting against the boy guarantees easy, risk-free profit. The announcer shouts excitedly with a shower of glowing coins in the background, declaring that combat will begin shortly. A few brute competitors in the arena laugh at Lucius, mocking that facing a weak child like that isn't even a fair bet. The announcer warns that the 2 energy pillars will charge to signal the start, while the fighters take their positions in the arena. Garzas cracks a subtle smile with his giant axe resting on his shoulders, while the announcer asks if both warriors are ready. Lucius remains completely still and focused, staring down his giant opponent without showing a single sign of hesitation. The announcer raises his glowing mallet, warning that the start signal is about to be given for the match's official opening. He strikes the gong, decreeing the start of combat. As the 2 energy pillars erupt with force on the sides of the arena, Garzas charges furiously, wielding his giant axe, cursing the young freshman as an insignificant brat as he attacks watching from the stands. Lilia startles at the unbelievable speed with which the muscular warrior sprints toward her friend Garzas, leaps into the air with an insane smile, bringing down his heavy axe, shouting for the freshman to meet his end. Right then and there, Lucius simply watches the attack coming down toward him with total indifference, thinking that an axe is a very slow weapon. He nimbly raises his arm, creating a powerful shield of blue energy that easily blocks the devastating strike. Garzas widens his eyes in utter shock upon realizing his full-force strike was stopped by a simple magic shield. Lucius releases a massive blast of blue energy that strikes his opponent dead center, violently blowing the giant away. Garzas lets out a cry of extreme pain upon taking a direct hit from the boy's devastating impact. Lucius remains in the exact same stance, holding his hand out in a cold, relentless manner after repelling his opponent. The blonde youth wears a deeply threatening, cold glare, displaying total control over the match. Garzas slumps completely unconscious face first onto the stage floor, marking the immediate end of the first duel. The audience of aristocrats watches everything in absolute silence, completely stunned by such a humiliation. The announcer trembles in fear, breaking out into a cold sweat over the bizarre twist that just unfolded before him. He uses his microphone to announce an alarm that the fight is over and that the grand winner is freshman Lucius Elminster bettors in the stands. Panic, complaining that they lost millions of coins by betting on the senior. The announcer screams hysterically that this was a monumental comeback with a single strike. Announcing the arrival of a super freshman, Lilia bites the table in rage from having worried so much over nothing, while Hector tells her to stop taking her stress out on the wood. Lucius remains at the center of the arena while absorbing all the green spiritual energy, leaving the spectators intrigued. He analyzes the situation, realizing his current power accumulation still isn't enough to activate his combat spirit circuit. In the second match, Lucius brutally defeats Ballandor Gillen with another fulminant blow, sending his opponent flying. The announcer goes wild seeing another knockout with just a single hit, asking what on earth is wrong with that blonde boy. Wealthy nobles admit they are ruined, desperately deciding to switch all their upcoming bets to the boy. In the third duel, Lucius advances quickly, knocking out yet another experienced opponent in an extremely agile, merciless manner. The announcer excitedly shouts to the entire crowd that the young freshman has just secured an incredible 3-fight win streak. He excitedly states that the 12-year-old underdog, Lucius Elminster, appears completely unstoppable in that combat arena Kathy celebrates, making a scene with pom-poms and wads of cash, driving Lilia to the point of telling the instructor to shut her mouth. Hector watches his main rival's overwhelming victory, biting his own lip so hard that it starts bleeding from frustration. Lucius feels the green energy flowing into his body, but silently reflects that the amount still isn't sufficient. Suddenly, a heavy, crushing aura of power emerges from the top VIP boxes. Completely changing the arena's cheerful atmosphere, Lucius senses the danger from afar, looking up with a deeply serious, suspicious expression beneath the shadows. The imposing silhouette of a giant man wearing a dark cape walks slowly toward the main VIP box. Violent discharges of purple electricity begin crackling across the arena walls and pillars due to the man's immense presence. The announcer trembles nervously, muttering that he knew nothing about this and had zero idea such an important guest was coming. The mysterious man approaches the railing under the attentive gazes of the entire crowd, which fell silent instantly in the stands. Lucius gazes at the mysterious figure in the box with a dark expression, feeling the weight of that monstrous energy upon himself. The red-cloaked VIP guest takes another step forward, slowly revealing his true identity to the audience. The young freshman clenches his fist so hard that blood begins dripping from his fingers out of pure tension and rage. He raises his head to stare directly at the formidable figure observing him from above with an extremely intimidating gaze. The imposing warrior with long white hair and glowing red eyes displays an aura of absolute superiority. Lucius falls into a deep state of shock and hidden rage, while his golden eyes gleam with fury beneath the shadow of his face. He recognizes the man instantly as the dangerous, legendary warrior known across the entire empire by the name of Atlas. The two powerful combatants lock silent, fixed gazes in the middle of the grand hall, giving rise to a new rivalry right then and there.